again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So I don't know if you saw it, but there is this awesome picture from the game 2 nights ago, I think, 3 nights ago, with the Clippers playing Golden State.
Yeah.
And Russ has the ball at the top of the key, and there is no one within 20 feet of him.
Aren't they like 1-3 or 1-4 since they?
No, they're like 0-4. They haven't won with him yet. It's so funny.
It's so disappointing,
like,
man. I saw
you know what, though?
an interview Paul George made where he basically said like, "Oh, I can't." He had to admit that he couldn't be the guy. That's why he had to bring other guys to LA or something like that.
Yeah, that's like he's 100% right.
Yeah.
He had a short window of time when he was with the Pacers where it looked like he could absolutely be that dude.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I think, was that, you know, the structure around him, like that team had David West and like Roy Hibbert and George Hill and Lance Stevenson. Like those teams were competitive. They were aggressive. They were physical. They were really well built. I like Frank Vogel as a coach. I know Laker fans don't like him, but you know, whatever. I like Frank Vogel a lot, and it worked really well. And then he just suffered that brutal fucking injury in Vegas for the U.S. camp. And it just took him a long time to get back on track. And I think at that point, his kind of opportunity to really kind of grow fully into a number one guy just never happened.
Like to be fair, that's not the worst thing. Like
nothing
there's a handful of those guys. I can think
Yes.
of two. I know, like turning into an NBA podcast already, but Giannis and LeBron, and that's maybe it, of guys who've done it and like led them single-handedly. Like you could say like Luka maybe, but he hasn't done it yet, right? Now he has Kyrie, so
right. I think you can say Giannis, LeBron, Jokic has made the finals.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Without
I
Murray
think,
too, without Jamal Murray. So.
So like, I think, you know, you've got him. I think you've got Steph. You have to give the credit to Kevin Durant. You have to give the credit to like KD's fucking. Like of all the, like I just saw the other day that he just passed. Who was it? Oscar Robertson, I think, for I don't know, like 16th or something on the all-time scoring list. Like he's missed so much time, and he's still going to end up probably in the top 10 scorers of all time. Kevin Durant is fucking incredible.
Yeah. So there's not many guys. I mean, like it felt like it used to be one of those sports where you could look at and say, like, oh, individuals could win, like could win it for you. You could get one guy who's just individually head and shoulders above other guys. Like, I mean, obviously in hockey you can't. Like Connor McDavid is on a whole different stratosphere of anybody this year, but it doesn't matter because even with him doing what he's doing, he could score what? I think he's on pace for 60 goals, over 60 goals and 150 plus points. Which would be 30 plus points more than the next highest guy who's also on his team.
Yeah.
And the Oilers aren't, you know, and it's the Bruins who are setting the the record for the fastest 100 point in 61 games. They beat the Lightning, who had it in 63, and the Montreal Canadiens from like the 70s who had it in 62 games. Like that's the team that's head and shoulders above the rest. But you've got McDavid, who's just individually the best player, but it doesn't matter. You can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year was, for me, like that series versus the Kings, to me was the moment where McDavid, like, I think we talked about this last year, but like that to me was the moment when, or like the time frame, I guess, when McDavid became the dude for me that everybody kept saying he was, where you just saw him exert his will in 45 1 minute 110 shifts, and it was incredible. Like there was there was just something about the way that he played last year, especially in that Kings series, which, like, the Kings team wasn't great, but they were well built.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're a number one center and you have to go out there against, Phil Deneau and Anze Kopitar, like, that's not fun. You know what I mean? Those are two guys who are going to play you hard. I like Todd McClellan. I think he's a great coach. I think he's going to put that team in a good position. So, for me, like, to see him just decide, like, all right, for 22 minutes a night, I'm going to make us unbeatable. And I just need you guys not to fuck this up, was incredible.
Yeah.
Like, it was really incredible. And I don't think I've ever seen a player do that that wasn't a goalie since, I don't know, maybe Chris Pronger when he took the Flyers to the finals. As far as just like, no. We're going to go absolutely as far as I can take us. And, I think that, for me, that was really a big moment for McDavid, for me, just becoming the guy.
I'm super excited. I have no care for the Oilers to go far, but I'm just excited to watch him in playoff hockey this year. Just like the level he stepped up to again. Like, it's funny because like it almost goes under the radar what he's doing, but it's probably the most impressive individual season we've seen since Gretzky Lemieux times, right? Like, Sid and Ovi have done some excellent things, and we've seen some great individual excellence over the last couple decades, but to be this far in front of anybody else is ridiculous, right? Like, it's just, and some of the stuff we've seen him do this year, I sent you that like little spin move at the blue line he did against the Flyers. Like, it's so ridiculously effortless. Like, it's gross. Like, he just turns on a dime, spins backwards through two guys at full speed, and picks up speed in the spin, and then and then dekes around another guy and almost finishes off. And it's just like, he was the first player in 50 plus years to put up 5 straight multi-goal games. The run he's on is just ridiculous, and the guy's 26. Like, he just keeps getting better and better. I think they interviewed Connor Bedard too recently, and he said like what this guy's doing is like inhuman. It's impossible. It's unbelievable, and like, you have to agree at that point, man. Like, I was looking at his stats again today. Like, it's a whole nother level. We talk about some of the greatest goal scorers of all time, and then you bring in McDavid, who, again, like we've talked about, he's got a great shot. He showed that, not the best showcase for it, but he showed off his shot essentially at the All-Star game with the accuracy contest. We know he has a great shot, but it's nowhere like when you talk about who are the best shooters in the game. He often doesn't get in that category. Just effortlessly 9 goals up on anybody else in the NHL right now. He walked away with 4 trophies at the end of the year. Ted Lindsay, the Hart Ross, right? Like, it's the Maurice Richard. Like, I don't know. I would imagine off the top of my head the last and maybe only player to ever do that was probably Gretzky, to walk away with all of those.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, maybe Lemieux.
He'd meet like and there could have been some others in that mix, but nobody was winning. The Hart back then, if it wasn't Lemieux or Gretzky, pretty much. So there might have been some other guys who did it, but there aren't many, and he just keeps breaking those records and getting in those territories where but the help isn't there. I mean, they made some moves though. We'll get into those. They did make some moves. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't necessarily really like the help isn't there comment. Like, I do think that team has a little bit stronger of a roster than people give it credit for.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're all used to what they were, right? I
think that's exactly right. I do think that there is this kind of entrenched mentality that they're still, the team that was like, oh, maybe Andreas Athanasiou can be our number 2 left wing or whatever. And like, I love Athanasiou, but he ain't that dude.
The Hall Eberle days too, right? So early days of McDavid's career.
Who was it that went from, what was it? I think they went from Buffalo to Edmonton and went on a stupid tear like their last year or the year before.
Oh man.
It wasn't like Sheehan, was it? Or Connor Sheary, maybe? It was somebody like that. Somebody really
Chason?
No, not Alex Chason. It was somebody. Anyways, doesn't matter. But anyways,
You know what's funny of the Eberle, Nuge, Hall days? Nuge is probably the best player of the three now, which is pretty funny to get. I mean, he's having a great year too. So there is help there. Yeah, Draisaitl, Nuge, Kane has been injured for most of the year, but when he's back, that helps. You bring in Matthias Ekholm to the team. Darnell Nurse is there. Stuart Skinner's been great. Jack Campbell's been trash, but it is what it is, right? What are you going to do? But there are moves from the Oilers that we'll get into, so we'll kind of revisit that and discuss it again. But we're going to go all the way back to any trades that happened after the last show. There's not many, just the big ones. Like O'Reilly was one of the ones. That's probably the first one we'll get into. The Patrick Kane trade happened a few days before the deadline because it was like the couple days before the deadline where a lot of the big ones happened. Deadline day was relatively quiet as it usually is. But there are some big ones to cover. We're going to basically treat this show just as a trade deadline review. We'll touch on the Ducks trades when we get to them. There was only, I think, 3 of them that we have to cover. Thruns, Wright, Kulikov, and Klingberg on deadline day.
Wow, the disrespect for Hunter Drew.
Yeah, the Hunter Drew trade. The Rocco Grimaldi, the Grimaldi and somebody else for future considerations was an interesting move. That whole saga with Grimaldi this year has been interesting, but
it's so funny.
Wild. But relatively quiet, but effective when you look at the contracts for the Ducks. Of the 2 guys, if you had to pick 2 guys they have to move that likely aren't going to come back, Kulikov and Klingberg were probably that. Shattenkirk was more likely, I think, of the 3 to re-sign. Henrique, you don't have to trade now. Gibson, you don't have to trade now. Comtois, you don't have to trade now. So if you don't have the offers, and we talked about this before, if you don't get what you want to get for those guys, you don't have to move them. And I think ultimately that's what it came to. And you look at the Klingberg situation, that one came down right to the wire. It's almost like we're going to get nothing for this guy or we're going to get something for this guy. And they wanted to get something for him and probably revisited a team that was interested in him before, quickly wrapped a deal together, and he ends up going to Minnesota at the end of the day. It wasn't the greatest package, but again, you signed this guy to get something for him, right? It's a tradable asset. That was broadcasted from the beginning. There was a slight chance you'd re-sign him, but you brought this guy in to trade him at the deadline. So the fact you still got anything for him, it is a win in that sense, right? You wish you would have gotten more, but you got something for him. And ultimately, it didn't really hurt the Ducks too much to go out and do that.
Yeah, we'll get there. The Klingberg thing is...
That's going to cover like a big part of it, and I want to actually get into that like in more detail. But.
So, rip them off, bud. You're in charge.
All right, so last show we did was February 13th, so we covered the Tarasenko trade already. So the first trade after that is a big one. Ryan O'Reilly from the Blues, and Noel Acciari also from the Blues, to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Adam Gaudette, Mikhail Abramov, a 2023 first, 2023 third, and a 2024 second, all to the Blues. The Wild also got a 2025 fourth for retaining further 50% of Ryan O'Reilly's salary. So originally he went to the Wild, so retained 50. The Wild retained 50 there, and then he went to St. Louis retained 50, and then he went to Toronto from Minnesota for another 50% retained. So I think they're only paying him like $1.875 million or something like that, which is great for the Leafs. And since he's been there, he's now playing second line center. We know we speculated this a little bit on our preview show, and Tavares has been pushed to the wing. Scored a hat trick in his first game in Toronto, I believe. And ultimately, it's worked out great. I mean, this was the destination we talked about. It would be a cool one to see him go to. It's what the Leafs are kind of looking for as a missing hole in their forward group, and the fit seems to have been great. I think it's one of those ones. It's a good deal for both sides. Like, they got a decent amount for Ryan O'Reilly, who is all things considered a rental. I think his contract expires at the end of this year, and he wasn't having a great year. But you get a first round pick, you get a first, a second, and a third, a couple prospects or AHL guys, but not too bad of a return.
Okay, so just as we go through this, like, here's a thing that I have noticed that I feel like, I don't know if it's always been this way or if I've just been noticing it. And so let me say it this way. I don't know if this isn't new and I'm only just really noticing it this year, or if it does feel a little bit different. I don't like the idea that Ryan O'Reilly wasn't having a great year. He wasn't having a productive year.
Yeah, fair.
They're different things to me. And I'm not saying this to argue like with you specifically, but I do think some of the conversation about it has been kind of frustrating for me in general about some of these trades, because it's like, well, that guy's not producing or this guy's not producing. And it's like, yeah, but he plays on a terrible team. He doesn't really have, necessarily the help. And I don't ever think we should underestimate how much moving from a bad situation to a good situation can reinvigorate. Like, it's one thing if the player in question is like Derek Grant or even Max Comtois, right, who we've seen play well and put up points. This is fucking Ryan O'Reilly. Like, I know that he's not putting up points, but that's also not the only thing he does for you. And that team isn't bringing him in to put up points. They're bringing him in to be an effective two-way center who can contribute offensively, who's going to help on the power play. He's going to be able to play on the penalty kill. Like,
he's also a guy who's been there and done that, right? He captained a team to a Stanley Cup championship. Like, that's huge for a locker room and a team that has this, stigma around them, or it's the truth. They can't get out of the first round.
Mm-hmm. And this is a guy who spent the first half of his career on two organizations that couldn't get their shit together. Like, if there's anybody that I have a little bit of faith walking into that room and being like, look, guys, I need you guys to calm the fuck down. Like, this is going to be fine. We're going to figure this out. Like, trust me here, right? Like, I think it's him. Like, I don't think this is the same as bringing in a 75-year-old Joe Thornton or Patrick Marleau, right?
Sure.
Where it's like, yeah, how much do they really have? Like, he's what, 31, 32?
Yeah, and he's only, like, production-wise, he's only one or two seasons removed from some serious production, right? And again, like you said, the Blues aren't the same team this year that they were the last couple of years, so it's understandable to see that go down a little bit.
Yeah, I think, since they won that Stanley Cup, they've been kind of trying to refine themselves, and they've got Thomas and they've got Kyrou and they've got a lot of players, but the totality of quality hasn't really been there for them. I think their blue line's been a lot. I don't think anybody really could have just how much losing Pietrangelo was going to kick them in the balls. Like, I like Torrey Krug. I don't think that was the worst swap, if you will, when you look at where they are in their careers and stuff. But, like, there is something to be said about losing your captain and a guy who had been there for that long. So, I think for St. Louis, the move makes a lot of sense. I think they came out well. They got a first, a third, and a second or fourth or something like that. They got a first, a third, and a second.
Yeah.
That's fine, man. There's no reason not to love that.
Yeah, he's a rental at the end of the day, too. So, like, that's a decent price when we look at what some of the other rentals went for to get in return for him. They're going to be late picks, you would assume, because it is Toronto. But still, again, they clearly found the fit early for both the player and for the team that wanted them, and they got what they wanted for him. I think ultimately, like, St. Louis were the big sellers of this deadline, moving Tarasenko and O'Reilly, and almost moving guys like Parayko as well. And they did pretty well. The return's not too bad. I'll give them some credit there, but dark days ahead, I guess, for the Blues after moving these guys out. So.
And I think the other thing with this trade is this was kind of one of the first trades where we did see that third team come in Minnesota and do the money laundering cap hit thing. And I think from a Ducks perspective, that one didn't necessarily worry me, but I was like, okay, this is a thing we're really doing this year. Like, because like Minnesota is in a really weird spot with like their cap. It's going to go like, the buyout cap hits go up next year. They've got players that they need to re-sign. Like, they're in all these weird spots, but they decided to, take a couple of different swings at the same time this year by maximizing out some of that cap space they had via retention slots. And
they did it twice. They did it twice.
Yeah. And I think it worked out really well for them. As for Toronto, I love this, man. I want them to make a run. Like we were talking about it before we started recording. Like, I would love for them to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and just really get one good run out of it and get that monkey off their back and really try to make a push. So, I like it. I think it's a good trade for pretty much everybody involved. The Wild pick up a free fourth-round pick for, $2 million in cap hit.
Yeah, for this year, right? So it's not going to hurt them. And, like, they're involved in the next trade we have here, too, the Orlov trade to Boston. They also retained money on that deal. They retained 50% of Orlov. So Orlov went from Washington to Minnesota, who retained a further 50%. They got a fifth-round pick from Boston for doing that. again, so just picking up some free picks here for, you having some cap space this year, using that to just pick up some free assets, and it's not going to affect you at all next year. And they didn't need the cap space this year, so you're just utilizing that cap space to get you some assets. And again, that's what Arizona's done that for so long, and they did that a few times this deadline. The Ducks were one of the teams that were saying that they would do that. They didn't ultimately end up doing it, and I think just for Anaheim, I would imagine the idea of picking that up for a 5th-round pick just didn't make sense to them. They probably wanted more, and ultimately it came down to who's going to do it for less. And in this case, I would imagine that was the Wild, the way they picked it up. But the full deal, and this was like a full 3-way trade. It wasn't just salary retaining in a sense. Minnesota also gave Andrei Svetlikov to Washington, and Washington got Craig Smith, a 2023 first, a 2024 third, and a 2025 second from the Bruins. And the Bruins got Garnet Hathaway, Andrei Svetlikov back, the signing rights for him, and Dimitri Orlov at essentially, what is that, like 75% retained, 50 and 50. And he's been great. He's had a few multi-point games since starting for them. He's not even on power play 1. He's on power play 2, but he's picked up a couple power play points. Been an excellent fit, and he's one of those guys that has for so long has flown under the radar in Washington. I think he's got some great underlying numbers. Real top pairing defenseman look to him when you go and you dig into all kind of the analytical details of his game and what he does well. Never been a massive points guy, but hey, I mean he's going to a great team for one. That is just on an unbelievable roll this year. We mentioned them briefly. I think it was early on in the show, right? Yeah, that they are the fastest team to 100 points in NHL history. To go out and add Orlov to that blue line that has Lindholm, that has McAvoy and Grzelcyk and Carlo and all these guys, like that's just it's a perfect fit, right? It's a perfect fit to bring a guy like Orlov there. I think again, it's one of those deals personally that's worked out for both teams. Minnesota, great, they pick up a 5th-round pick for doing absolutely nothing. Boston shed some salary to bring him in. They bring in a guy who seemingly right now is a great fit for them. It only costs them a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd-round pick to do so, and they add a typical kind of Bruins grinder type guy as well, and Garnet Hathaway to their bottom 6. So I like the deal a lot. I think it's a great fit for them. It was a surprising one though, because I hadn't heard Orlov's name out there, and the Caps didn't really at the time seem like they'd be a team that would be sellers. But interesting to see him kind of go the other way.
Yeah, I think Washington had one of the more interesting trade deadlines of all the teams kind of involved, just because they kind of they were kind of half in and half out at the same time, and they did it in a way that made a lot of sense. They really did just kind of try to restructure kind of the rough build of that team. But I think if you're Boston, the Orlov thing does a couple of different things. One is it takes a lot of pressure off of Matt Grzelcyk, who's not had a great year. His production has definitely kind of slipped, and he is a guy who you are hoping provides depth from the blue line, or offensive depth from the blue line, right? He's a guy that you have out there to kind of really put up points, move the puck, run your power play 2, and things like that. So I think to upgrade from him to Orlov is huge. It takes a lot of pressure off of Lindholm. It takes a lot of pressure off of McAvoy. And it just adds more quality and skill to the top of that lineup. And I just think it's a great move. They move out Craig Smith, who, just never really worked out for them there. And like you said, they bring in Hathaway, who's a Boston guy. Like, if any kind of, bottom 6 player was exactly what they want, it's him. So I think, again, like you said, this is a trade that makes a lot of sense for everybody. I think Craig Smith's deal expires at the end of this year.
I think so, yeah.
So it's not like Washington is taking on long-term cap space. They picked up a bunch of assets. Minnesota, like you said, picked up a free 5th-round pick. And Boston just got better, which, is infuriating, but it's true. So, I think there were a lot, especially early on, a lot of the trades that kind of came out of nowhere made a lot of sense for everyone involved. And I think that was part of what was so kind of surprising, is it was just a lot of good trades. So I think, it makes a lot of sense for everybody involved. I don't know that I have too much more to say about it than that, but I think if you're Boston and Washington, you come out of this, pickles pie, man. Like, this is perfect. This is exactly what you wanted.
It was a weird year because we didn't really see, at least early on, we'll obviously get to possibly a few that you could put in that category, but we didn't see a lot of, oh my God, they just fleeced them type trades this year, right? We've seen a lot of those over the last couple of years. A lot of the big deals that went through this year, you could understand where they're coming from both sides, and even a few, like, you could say obviously that Chicago got fleeced in the Kane trade, but again, like, he held all the control there. He only wanted to go to the Rangers. You can understand why
they got more for him than Claude Giroux did.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the one that you're looking at, right, with the Patrick Kane trade. That's the trade you're looking at, is the Claude Giroux trade. It's the same situation.
Yep.
And they got more for him than Claude Giroux.
That's what you have to compare it to. You can't compare it to any other trade. This guy had full no trade clause, only would waive to go to one place, wanted to go to the Rangers. They had to make it happen. The Rangers obviously want to make it happen, but they're not going to pay what this guy would normally be worth. So it's one of those situations where you can understand why they got what they got. But, okay, we got to get to this one because this was the one we hoped would happen when we talked about our reviews, the big one. The number one name on the board for players that are going to be available. That was Timo Meier. He does.
Oh, not Vitaly Kravtsov?
No, not Vitaly Kravtsov. No, can't do that one. Meier goes to the Devils. Perfect fit. Love that trade. Not for as much as we thought. So we went back and forth a few times on the last pod, and even just leading up to this trade, just through messaging about what they could have to offer from what the eventual deal is going to look like. Throwing around guys like Seamus Casey and maybe Alexander Holtz. Dawson Mercer's name got thrown in the mix there too. The only untouchables felt like Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, but the other guys would be on the table. Ultimately, it didn't cost them any of those guys, which is a major win to do that. I think ultimately what it came down to is the fact that there was no extension in place. Like, Timo Meier's an RFA, I think, at the end of this year anyway, so it's a better situation to be in. But with no extension in place, I feel like as San Jose, you can't ask for those guys, right? With no guaranteed extension in place, that helps the Devils out, and ultimately it was Andreas Johnsson. So I got that one piece right. Fabian Zetterlund, Nikita Arkadiuk, Shakir Mukhamadullin, a 2023 first with a conditional first, a 2024 conditional second, and a 2024 seventh round pick. The conditions are, if the pick is a top 2 selection, New Jersey will transfer their own 2024 first round pick. If New Jersey makes the 2023 Eastern Conference Final and Meier plays in 50% of the games, or New Jersey makes the 2024 Eastern Conference Final, the pick becomes New Jersey Devils 2024 first. That's the second round pick. So it becomes a first if they make the Eastern Conference Final this year and Meier plays in 50% of the games, or if they make the Eastern Conference Final next year. So it's a very good possibility, because of how well the Devils have been built, that will turn into 2 firsts, which is good for the Sharks in that one. If the 2024 first is top 10, then the Devils have the option to transfer it to 2025 as well. A lot of conditions in this one, but Meier did go the other way, along with basically just a bunch of other roster players to make sure the roster limits,
50 contract
roster limits stayed in place. And Meier was 50% retained, so the Devils are only paying him $3 million right now. Hasn't played yet, so we can't talk about how this has looked so far for the Devils. I mean, the way Dawson Mercer and some guys have played lately, they haven't really needed it. So the thought of adding Meier to that roster is unbelievable. Like, Mercer scored in 8 straight games at this point right now. He's just on a tear. Scott Harrington was one of the pieces that went the other way. He ended up going through waivers, and the Ducks claimed him. So that is one piece I guess you can't include in the trade. But all in all, I think for what the Sharks got, I don't think it is as bad as some people made it out to. I do think very good chance that turns into 2 firsts, if not a first and a second. Shakir Mukhamadullin is a top 5 prospect in the Devils system. Zetterlund and Arkadiuk are good players that Zetterlund's played, I think, 40 games this year in the NHL, so he can walk right into their lineup. Has some pretty good upside still. Arkadiuk is, when he was drafted, I believe, had the potential to be a, kind of a 4 or 5, and has had a solid pro debut so far in the AHL. And then Andreas Johnsson is, again, a player who can jump right into the Sharks roster. Basically swap out for Meier. Hasn't really fit so far in New Jersey. Been buried in the AHL for most of the year, so he gets to kind of revive his career a little bit. and he's played a few games for the Sharks since going over to San Jose. So, all in all, I think it's a pretty good deal. It is slightly disappointing maybe from a Sharks side to not get a Seamus Casey, an Alexander Holtz, a Dawson Mercer, but ultimately that was always going to be a tough deal to swing to get one of those guys.
Yeah, I'm not quite as optimistic, or not optimistic, but like positive on the return for the Sharks here. It's I think your point about getting the 2 first-round picks is legit, and I think that absolutely has to matter. I do think it is a bit of a missed swing to not walk out with one of their better prospects. Like, they didn't get Sharon Govich, they didn't get Mercer, they didn't get Holtz. Like, I think it was fair to say they were never going to get Luke Hughes. Like, the Devils weren't going to trade their best player's little brother. Like, that just wasn't what was about to happen. But I just think, Mike Grier had an opportunity to maybe get a little bit more. And look, if that's the best offer out there, that's the best offer out there. You have a responsibility to your team and your organization to take the best offer you can get. But it did feel a little frustrating to see him hold all the cards and kind of come out of this without, I think that true blue chip prospect. Like, I think for me, I would have rather had one great prospect than 2 or 3 pretty good prospects. Makua Dillon, I think that's how you say it. God, man. Yeah. Reading his name and trying to figure out how to say it because I never hear it is... I never hear his name, so I can't build the habit of how to say it. But Scott Wheeler talked about him a little bit and how he's very toolsy and he's very raw. He's got good size, good mobility, but there's just questions about how much of that total package he can put together. And if he can, that's great. But I guess my question is how confident are we the Sharks are going to get more out of him? Yeah. You know what I mean? They've had good defensemen, right? But I just wonder how much they're going to be able to get out of him to maybe make that being we'll settle for this guy with, maybe a lower floor, but a pretty high ceiling. Yeah. I just think it's an interesting. I think, again, like I said, Mike Grier has a responsibility to take the best trade package he can get, and if that's what this was, then that's what this was. There's another situation we're going to get to with a defenseman moving from west to east that's similar. But I just think, I do think it would have been better to take 2, a first, a conditional second, and Alexander Holtz than the totality of everything else. Even if it's a first, a third, and Alexander Holtz.
Yeah,
I just think
even
Alexander
take out that
Holtz
conditional second that could be a first to get a Holtz, or even get again, it's very possible the Sharks like Muhammad Dillon more than Seamus Casey, but I think the consensus is the top 4 in their pool by a mile is Hughes, Nemec, Holtz, and Casey. And Casey's the number 4. But even to get a guy like that and at least have somebody who considered by most to be a higher prospect in their system, to get him and take off maybe that second doesn't have a condition to become a first on, it's just a second or something like that, right? Where then you just get a better prospect, or it's not Zetterlund coming back, it's somebody a little bit further down the pecking order that isn't an NHL roster player at that point. It's an AHL forward coming back. I agree with you there. You would have liked to see something a little bit more high profile come back than quality over quantity in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think if you're giving up a legitimate first-line winger, a legitimate 30-goal scoring first-line winger who can play at both ends, you should walk out of that with a top 6 forward prospect or a top pair defenseman prospect, and I don't think they got that, and that's fine. But for me, who was I talking? It was Jake from Across the Pond who, to me, he made a comment to me that he felt the quantity here was more valuable because the Sharks have to start building up that prospect. Yeah, and I get that. I think that's more than fair. I don't think for me, Meyer is the guy I'm using to get quantity.
No,
I think I would rather bring down, try to move somebody else and get a bunch of picks or a bunch of prospects than move my absolute ace in the hole for that quantity. I understand that thought process. I just don't agree with it because I think Meyer is of the quality of player that you should be able to leverage that for better quality of return, not necessarily quantity.
And it's not even quantity of prospects here because Janssen's not adding to their prospect pool. I would argue Zetterlund's almost not even a prospect at this point. He's 22 or 23.
He's 23. He put up 20 points in 45 games.
Very borderline of being a prospect in their system. Arkadiak and Muhammad Dillon are the two prospects you get. So instead, again, take out condition on a pick or take out a pick, swap those two for one. Now it's the difference between one player or two players adding to your system. Well, I would rather have one higher rated player than two players who are kind of middle of the pack. So I get the thought process there, and I'm behind the premise of the idea.
Absolutely, I don't think it's an unfair thought process.
Yeah, when the Sharks really don't have anything right now, Merkley didn't work out for them, so it's beyond Eklund right now. I don't think there's much in their system. So, yeah, for sure, you want to add a bunch of guys and have a bunch of swings at it. But they're starting from square one right now. So when you're trading a guy like Timo Meier, you want somebody else in the system here who can be, close to Eklund's level, I think, to say, listen, we've got these two guys. And, man, the thought, if I was a Sharks fan, the thought of, again, Eklund and Holtz played on the same team together. They played on the same line together. In Sweden, they did some great things together. I'm sure there was a lot of Sharks fans who were hoping they'd wake up after the Meier trade and Holtz would have been on San Jose. That would have been the big win. I know that was always going to be tough to pull off, but yeah, that's the only thing I hang on from this trade is because for New Jersey, this is a home run. You get as long as you get this guy signed, and you have the rights to. He's not a UFA, so he's an RFA again. So you've got you've got first talks and everything to figure this out. I think he ultimately will. He's got international teammate Nico Hischier on that team, Jonas Siegenthaler as well. He's got some guys who are from the same home country as him, so that always helps as well. So I just think it's such a huge win for them. When if you can get this guy locked down even to an 8-year contract, that takes him till he's 34. That's the max deal you can give him. That's fine. That's absolutely perfect. Absolutely. Perfect age to be getting this guy at. They needed this. They needed a guy who's 30 to 40 goal potential to play with the Jack Hughes or even play with Nico Hischier. Dawson Mercer has turned out to maybe right now the second best player from that draft, and the run he's on is unbelievable. Nico Hischier looks like a future, elite 1B center, like a guy who's a number 2, but you're like, he's only a number 2 because they have Jack Hughes, right, who's an elite offensive producing player in this league. They still have Holtz. Then they've got Hughes, Nemec, Casey coming up. They already got Dougie Hamilton. They are well built. I love it for them. I love what they've done. This was the perfect trade to pull off. This is the exact type of guy they needed, the exact type of player, big physical goal-scoring winger that they bring in. I'm checking before every Devils game, I'm checking Meier's injury update to see when he's going to play because I'm going to watch the first game he plays in a Devils uniform because they're already a fun team to watch, and you add him to the mix, and you can't get anything better than this for the Devils to hold on to Nemec, Hughes, and Holtz, and even Casey, and to bring in Timo Meier to that team. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and real quick, just because, again, like we said, I think Jake's point about needing to build up the quantity aspect of that prospect base is totally fair, but to me, that's what you use Kevin LeBlanc for. That's what you use James Reimer for. Yep. Maybe you even look at moving Mario Ferraro.
You could move Logan Couture at some point. I know the contract's
right,
awful,
you're
but
gonna
you're going to have to.
The contract's awful, but
and
that's exactly right.
Will.
He's got at this point, he's got a 3-team trade list. So somehow he has a worse trade protection for the team than Fowler does.
Yeah.
That's a dude where you're like, you know what? Let's just get the fucking money off the books. Let's get the dude out of here. I'll just take 7 third-round picks. I don't care. That, to me, is the one where you do that. I do just think that this was a little bit of a missed opportunity, given the age, the quality, and the place of the player in the deadline as far as guys to go get. He was, like you said, very clearly the best player on the market. So that's all, But again, you got to do what you got to do. They did get what was likely going to be 2 firsts, and that's not nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So
and Mukama
there's a
Dillon,
lot to like there. I just think it's not
I like too. Like
the best.
yeah, it's good, but it felt like there was potential for it to be better. I think
Yes,
that's
exactly right.
Okay, this next one, a name that I didn't like. I think I'd heard out there a couple times, but it wasn't like a guy I thought would be moved. But the Preds are terrible this year, and this is a Lightning deal. This is a typical Lightning deal. A guy's got a couple more years left. It's like a middle 6 guy that has sometimes jumped into the top 6, but he's cost controlled. They can have him for the next couple of years, and it's fine. Tanner Jeannot goes to the Lightning from the Preds, and they get a first in 2025, a second in 2024, a third in 2023, a fourth in 2023, and a fifth in 2023. The only conditions are that first in 2025 is top 10 protected.
Did you hear that I think Cap Friendly said this is the first trade that they have record of that included a pick from every round 1 through 5? I'm
not surprised. Yeah, that's
like
crazy, but it's not.
Hilarious,
yeah, that's
but
not.
It's super funny that it's just like, all right, we're going to give you 1 first, 1 second, 1 third, 1 fourth, and 1 fifth.
and Cal Foote too. Like, well, that's not nothing. That's not nothing. So
hey, real quick, do you know what Cal Foote's full name is?
No,
it's Callahan. I had no idea
really?
His full name was Callahan. I swear to God, I just assumed his name was Cal.
Yeah,
I didn't
Cal
even
or
think
Callum or something like that. Yeah,
his name is Callahan. So real quick, couple of things about this trade that I want to say.
Yep.
One, I don't know if you saw, but when Matt Duchene first got to the Avs, he lived with Adam Foote. And Cal Foote was 10.
That's funny.
At that point. So he got to, this would be like one of Niedermayer's kids playing and getting to room with Cam, which was just super fun. The other thing here is, and that I think is really interesting, I don't know that you could pick, I think I said this on Twitter, I don't know that you could pick 2 teams that I trust more to get the most out of the players that they got back than these 2. If you said this is a early 20s defenseman, hasn't quite hit his potential, he's going to get moved. Yeah, Nashville, dude, 100%.
Yeah, long track record of them having some success with defensemen. So
Tanner Jeannot, physical forward, some skill. He's going to be able to play up and down the lineup and fill out lines and different things like that. Who do I trust to get the most out of him? John Cooper, 100% John Cooper. Yep. I love John Cooper. Like, I think this trade makes a lot of sense for both teams. And I really I saw some people say that after Brisebois' comments about this trade being like, look, I know what these picks are could likely turn into. I know what the likelihood of these guys joining us and helping this team win with the core we have right now are. And I think Tanner Jeannot is more valuable at this point. And I saw a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot, I saw a handful of people, but people I really respect and I think are very smart, say that this feels like him admitting they don't do a good job of drafting or developing. To me, this is him saying we're really good at both of those things, and we still know Stamkos is 31.
Yep.
Kucherov is what, you know what I mean? We have these guys right now.
Yep.
None of these guys, the 2025 first-round pick, whoever they get, is not going to help Stamkos win a cup in the next 2 years.
Yep.
It's literally impossible.
Yeah, Stamkos has 2 years left on his contract. He's 33. Kucherov is 29. He's got 4 years after this. Hedman is 32 and has 2 more years after this. So, you got to win now with this core.
You go for it. You go for it every time. You have a chance to build an incredible legacy with this team for hockey in Southern Florida, or Tampa Bay, I think, is technically Northern Florida. I don't know. It's all made up. Florida doesn't exist. It's like our PEI. It's not a real place.
And throw Vasilevsky in there, too. He's 28 as well, right? So, you got 5 years. 4 or 5 years to win some more cups.
And I just think it's more than reasonable and, frankly, the correct decision to be no, let's just pump this shit up as much as we can. Because by the time that it is starting to fall apart, they're going to have to move these guys. Then you can move these guys for picks, right? You can get a couple of extra seconds. You can maybe you get a first for someone who wants to think Vasilevsky is the missing piece, right?
Yeah.
I just think There is nothing about this trade that I don't love. This is one of my favorite trades of this deadline from both sides. Yeah. I think this was awesome.
Also, like, why are we surprised with Tampa Bay? They've done this like 3 years in a row. They did it with Barclay Goodrow. They overpaid for him, and when they traded for him, ultimately it worked out for them. They did this for Brandon Hagel as well,
who's had a great year.
Yeah, he's been great, and they've played him in the top 6, and he's been great. But at the time, it was like, oh my god, you paid like, was it 2 firsts for this guy? Like
2 firsts,
but they don't mean
plus
anything. Those 2 firsts don't mean anything to Tampa Bay. And then again, did they overpay for Tanner Jeannot? If we take the teams out, the situations, the player, and the price, yes, they overpaid for Tanner Jeannot. Does it make complete sense for Tampa Bay? 100%, it makes complete sense for them. He's an RFA. He only makes $800,000 this year. He easily fits under the cap. They'll figure out their cap wizardry, sign him to some 8-year deal at $3.2 million or something like that, and they'll have him for the next 8 years with Cirelli and Nick Paul and Eric Cernak, who they also have signed for like the next 9 years. That's what they'll do. And they'll have him at least for the next 5 is really what they care about. But the reason they're signing these guys to 9-year deals is so they don't go somewhere else. They say, listen, you get guaranteed money. You can stay here. We really care about the next 4 to 5 years. And, you know, if after that...
and there's no state income tax, by the way.
Yeah.
So you can take a little bit of a haircut and not actually lose that much money.
Yeah. I
fucking love this trade.
I don't think they're signing, you know, Nick Paul to 7 years and Eric Cernak to 9 years and thinking, you know, we're going to be competitive in 7, 8, 9 years. I'm sure they hope it. But again, it's a way to keep these guys around at a, you know, maybe a reduced price and be very competitive for the next 3, 4, 5 years with Stamkos, with Kucherov, with Hedman, with Vasilevsky. And then if you draft well and you can replace these guys, you know, when Cirelli is, you know, got 3 more years left or whatever, those guys got a few more years left, fine. If not, they'll still be tradable at that point with 3 or 4 years left on their contract, and you can start fresh. So, I mean, I love a lot of the moves the Lightning do. I understand the saying it's an overpayment, but the team receiving him, it's not an overpayment for what they're getting. These are all late picks. These are all going to be late picks, presumably. And the Lightning cover their ass, say, you know what, if in 2 years we are bad, well, it's top 10 protected. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
We have an off year or whatever,
I don't think they've overexposed themselves as much as some other people do.
Yeah.
And that could be me being semi-prisoner of the moment, looking at the success that this team has had, looking at the success that these players have had. But I think you have to go for it. I just think you have to. Like, this to me is the other side of, well, our star player's 28. We got to tear it down. It's like our star players, our championship core with players who are among the very best at their position. We can still do this for another couple years. Like, if you told me in a few years that, you know, they had a second line of Jeannot, Cirelli, and Hagel, I don't hate that.
No, not bad at all.
I don't hate that at all. I don't think that's the end of the world. Like, you know, you've got Braden Point, who's going to be the number 1 center. You've still got Kucherov. You've still got, what's his name? Stamkos. Like, you know, they're going to have Kaloran is coming off the books. You know, Belmar, Perry, they were both coming off the books. Like, and they only make $1 million each, but like, there's still a lot of opportunity here for this team to be creative and aggressive and continue to make the most out of this. And they've got one of the best rosters in the league, and they owe it to that team to give them every opportunity to maximize their potential as a unit.
Yeah.
I think this rocks.
I love the trade too for Tampa Bay. I think it makes a ton of sense for them. Another trade that makes a ton of sense, Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty going to Toronto. I liked this trade a lot. I really do like Jake McCabe. I think he is a top 4 defenseman. He's looked at in a very bad team in Chicago this year, and now he goes to Toronto where he can kind of be that guy. Sam Lafferty was one of the more sought-after kind of like energy grinder type players. And the Leafs getting Achari and then Lafferty, that's just great for their bottom 6 to add guys like that. And then on the high end, again, O'Reilly up front, and then adding Jake McCabe, and it cost you a 2025 conditional first and a 2026 second round pick. Like, picks 3 and 4 years out from now, that it's also a top 10 protector. It reminds me again of the Jeannot trade in the sense like these are picks like way down the road that they're still going to be good. They've got Matthews and Marner and Nylander. Like that's likely going to be a late pick. What they hope for them, they're still going to be competing for cups at that time. Prospects and Joey Anderson, Pavel Gogolev, but the fits for McCabe and Lafferty, I really like. I've been critical of Dubas, but I really like the work he did at this deadline. Finally, kind of stepped out of his comfort zone and dealt picks and got creative and. To bring O'Reilly, Achari, McCabe, Lafferty, and eventually we'll talk about Luke Shannon and a few of the other guys too. Like they just did some great work, added more I think than anybody, but just really filled out their lineup and with players that fit what they didn't have. So I really like the fit from McCabe and Lafferty in Toronto.
Yeah, I think the McCabe and Lafferty trade is a good trade. It is hard for me personally to separate this trade from the Sandin trade, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But to everything that I did just say, if you think Jake McCabe is going to come in and fill a role, fill a profile, and provide a style and level of play that allows you to get the most out of, frankly, the most expensive core in the entire league, I think you have to make it. And if you want to say there's something about this that's a little desperate in so much as he moved a 22-year-old defenseman to get a first-round pick to make up for trading a first-round pick for what Jake McCabe's 28, 29. Like, that's I don't hate it and I don't love it, but
I just felt like the Sandin situation, regardless, it was heading in that direction for Toronto. He was almost like. He felt he was better and he should be in a top 4 situation. The Leafs couldn't really afford to put him in that situation with the guys they had in and what they were paying some of these guys. He was on his way out, whether Toronto liked it or not. Like it just made sense to move him at that point. They bring in a guy stylistically right now who is a better fit for what they need. It sucks giving up Sandin. I'm sure they didn't want to give up Sandin. But you bring in Erik Gustafsson, who's had a great year and can kind of fill out the rest of the bottom pair of your lineup, be a second power play guy possibly, and you get a first-round pick back. You recoup the first. That I don't think they ended up trading it, right? So they still have it, I believe. I don't think they ended up flipping it anywhere.
I don't think they did either. I think they still have the Boston pick this year, which is going to be the 30 seconds.
For Dubas, that's check. Right? He adds to his roster, he gets everything he wants, and he still keeps the first that he was always been so hesitant of moving away a first-round pick.
Right.
And I believe it was a 2023 first-round pick, I think, as well. So he gets a first-round pick this year to add a guy to his roster that can hopefully make a difference in the next couple of years while they're still competing. So,
well, it also gives them, to your point, it gives them a pick they can move at the draft.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no reason they can't take that first and another second or something and, move that to get somebody who's maybe just on the outs in a situation, right? Like, if it ends up being the 32nd pick in the draft or the 27th pick in the draft, like, would you think about moving that for Maxime Comtois and someone else and a pick? Right. I don't think that's the worst trade if you're them. No. You get a player, you move back about 15, 20 spots, right?
Yeah.
That's not the end of the world.
Assess what you need based on how your playoffs went, right? And if you feel like you need a profile, you're going to lose a guy in the summer, maybe you flip that pick again. Or if you feel like you're better drafting, a guy in that position, then fine, take him. But again, it sucks losing Sandin. I just felt like it was always trending in that direction. And then they, we might as well assess the rest of their trades as a whole. The only other one is the Luke Schenn deal. Luke Schenn comes back to Toronto.
Well, they also traded Pierre Engvall.
Yeah, Pierre Engvall went out essentially for salary reasons. They got a third-round pick in 2024, and then they spent their third-round pick this year to get Luke Schenn. So essentially, it's Engvall out, Schenn in. You lose a fourth. You lose a fourth this year, and you get a fourth next year. Or you lose a third this year, get a third next year. I like Luke Schenn. I think he's redeemed himself with his play in Vancouver this year. The Leafs, obviously, a familiar team for him. That's where he was drafted and started his career. Provides a little something different to their blue line, a bit more physicality, and you add him to a bottom pairing. Maybe they play him with Erik Gustafsson. Now you've got Brody and McCabe, Riley, and I guess it's Hall. I'm trying to remember who I'm missing on their blue line, but it's coming together, and it's a new look, and they needed a new look because we've had questions about their blue line for so long. But yeah, so this is what they're running right now. Giordano's the guy I forgot. So they're running Riley, Shen, McCabe, Brody, Giordano, Hall, and they still have Liljegren, they still have Gustafsson, so they do have options. I think they ran actually 7 defensemen last game because Gustafsson played on the second power play, so they're running seven defensemen. But it is a great kind of shift around of their blue line, which I felt like it desperately needed that, right? Like that's always been the question mark with the Leafs is, can the bottom 6 help out that all-star top 6? And is that defense going to be enough? And clearly they felt it wasn't. They moved a bunch of guys out, brought about 3 or 4 guys in, and really reworked the shape of that and what it looks like. And I think they did good. I hate to say it, but I think they had a pretty good deadline. I like the moves they made. So,
no, I do too. I'm with you, man. I think all things considered, I'm trying to figure out who it was. I want to see who drafted. It was Randy Carlisle, then that means it was Berkey who drafted Engvall. I was kind of hoping that Engvall had been drafted by Lou,
yeah.
But it's too
no.
But no, I think everything you said is right. I think that they're adding dynamics to the bottom of the lineup that they just frankly don't have. And I know everybody's all like, "Oh, Luke Schenn sucks" or whatever. It's like, no, man, he's won 2 cups. He's been a meaningful member of those teams, even if it is only in a depth role. Like, I just don't think it's fair to some of these guys to hyper fixate on the top of the lineup. Like,
yeah.
Dave Bolland had 1 great goal, and that was it. But he'll never pay for another fucking drink in Chicago, ever.
Yep.
Because that 1 goal meant everything. I just don't think you can, rule some of that out. Like, I don't think Luke Schenn needs to score, a fucking game-winning clapper or anything like that. I just think he needs to just go out there, be physical, not get completely caved in.
He's found his niche too. Like he really has. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. There was but he was a guy who was drafted as high as he was, who was trying to fill these expectations of I've got to be like the guy. And I feel like over time, like the hate for Luke Schenn has receded as people realized, and him as a player, he's realized like this is what I am. I'm a bottom pair defenseman. I'm a physical guy. Block a lot of shots. Throw my body around. I'm going to be a shutdown guy. I feel like once that was figured out, he's been good. He was very good for Vancouver this year on a team that wasn't that great. And I think the Leafs don't have anything like him. I think Justin Hall is the closest thing they have to him.
I'd take Luke Schenn.
I would take Luke Schenn. And Luke Schenn's making $1.2 million less or something like that than Justin Hall is, right? So it's a lot easier to have him around in the lineup. And I think Leafs fans have softened on him because I know a lot of Leafs fans here that were happy about Luke Schenn coming back, and that just shows you how the opinions have changed of what type of player you're expecting from him. You expect him to come in, play hard, be a bottom pairing defenseman, be out there on the penalty kill, and not be a detriment to you. And that's what the Leafs need. That's what they need. Yep. That's what they get in Schenn. That's what they get in McCabe, and they get some offense back in a depth guy like Gustafsson, who's had a great season in Washington, being their power play 1 guy when Karlsson went down. So then you've got some depth there. If you're playing against a different team and you want a different look, you can throw Gustafsson in there, and it doesn't hurt you at all. So,
hey, here's a fun little fact. So you said that Luke Schenn was drafted 5th overall.
Yeah.
Or you said he was drafted very high. I wanted to look. He was drafted 5th overall.
Yeah.
He has played the 6th most games of anybody from that draft class.
Yeah.
Now, we can certainly, if you want to, have a conversation about some of the other defensemen who went after him.
I'm sure.
Karlsson, Yossi, some of these guys, even Tyler Myers. I'd rather have Luke Schenn than Tyler Myers, especially for the money.
Yeah.
But John Carlson went fucking so funny. Like Pietrangelo, Doughty, and Bogosian all went just in front of him after Stamkos. So it's just weird how this stuff works out this way. But I'm happy for him, and I love the idea of him coming back to that team and being able to help them kind of get over the hump. I think that's really cool.
Okay, we got our first Ducks one. Henry Thrun, the rights, traded to the Sharks. Ducks got a 2024 third-round pick back. I was surprised.
I have no idea how they got that trade.
I don't
have
know.
no idea.
I like Thrun a lot. Do I think as a player, as a prospect without just the rights involved, do I think he's worth a third? I think that would be the max of what he would have been worth, because he's had a good college career, not amazing, so he hasn't really increased his value. But they got full value, I think, for where the player is at this level, and it was trading his rights away. And there's no guarantee he's going to sign San Jose either, right? Like, he still has the option to go test free agent. I'm sure Greer has probably had a conversation with him and with the agent and judged that there's enough there to think that he would want to come to San Jose. And clearly it's an opportunity thing, right? Like, there's definitely a better chance for him to break into San Jose's blue line next season than there would be in Anaheim. I like the trade for both. I'm happy for Thrun. I really don't like the hate that he got for, people tell him to screw off and they're going to boo him when he comes, like, whatever. But, like, again, ultimately he's making a decision for his career, and
yeah, I
completely get it. Like, the Ducks,
I have no issue with
the Ducks do have a lot of players coming in on that left side, a lot of high profile players when we talk of Mintyukov and Zellweger, and they've already got Fowler there, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's tough to break in. The Drysdale, again, still not on the left, but taking up a roster spot. Leno's coming as well. Noah Warren, like, they've been heavy drafting on defensemen lately. So they're just, and then Lacombe, he agreed to come, and all of a sudden, like, it's like, there go all my spots, and I'm gonna have to really compete to try and get in here. I might have to spend a couple seasons in the AHL to get there. It's gonna be a grind. Whereas I could make my choice and go somewhere else and pick where I want to go. And whether he signs in San Jose or not, I think it's a great fit for him if he wants to try and get into the NHL as soon as possible, because there really isn't much standing in his way to get into that roster. Some of the guys there, if he plays well enough, he could have a good camp and start the season in the NHL next year. Like, that's a possibility for him. So I like the fact, I love the fact that the Ducks got a 3rd-round pick for him. I think that's great value. It is next year. It should be a higher pick because the Sharks aren't going to be good next year either. So it's going to be closer to a 2nd than a 4th. And I like it. Right? It's great. I love that. It's a 3rd, like, but it's a 3rd no matter what. But it's closer to a 2nd than it is a 4th.
If you're it's one of my favorite things that we do every year, because, like, if you're a bad team with an early 2nd-round pick, that's basically a late 1st. That's great. Yeah. If you're a good team with a late 1st-round pick, that's just a 2nd-rounder. Fucking trade it.
I love it. It's my favorite thing. I love it. I throw it out whenever I can. But yeah, I do. I like it for. Again, I hate that he's going to the Sharks because I do like him as a player. I don't want to see him in San Jose and the Sharks do well with him on the team. Right. Personally, though, I can understand where he's coming from. I hope he does well there, as long as he's not doing well when we're playing there. So.
Right. I think you said it specifically, but, like, he was a 4th-round pick. They got a 3rd-round pick for him. Yeah. Net value, they moved forward. Now, J.D. Burke, Cam Robinson, and I think Ryan Lambert, because Thrun is a college guy. They all said, and those are 3 people that I trust, especially Lambert included for the college part of it. This is a guy who should probably be on an NHL roster next year. Yeah. That doesn't mean he's an NHL player yet. What that means is he's a guy who has at this point earned the right to get 50, 60 games at the NHL level and really see if he can make it happen. There's no guarantee that he doesn't finish next year on the Barracuda, right?
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all plays out. The other thing here is Verbeek mentioned on one of the shows yesterday. I saw they played a clip of it during the intermission.
One of the shows they have on TuneIn.
But this was him talking to Frenchie and Jaguar Yver.
Okay.
This wasn't even the Beaker thing. Right. But he made the comment. He said, "Look, Henry told me a couple of weeks ago that he wasn't interested in signing with the team, and that sucks, but we appreciated it. Him and his agent gave us about 5 teams that he would be interested in signing with. And so we reached out to those, and we were able to make the best deal with San Jose."
Yeah,
a couple of things.
I love that. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, a couple of things. I appreciate that from Thrun. He absolutely, under no circumstances, does he owe it to the organization to give them that heads up. He would have never said a fucking word and just on the last day called them up and been like, "I'm not signing." That's fine. I don't care. He has every right to do that. This is the tiniest bit of leverage that he's actually had for the first time in and hopefully for him be a long, successful NHL career. But he did, and I think that's very cool that he reached out to that. And I think it actually speaks very well of Verbeek that he was like, oh, the best trade's San Jose. I don't care. I'm making that trade. Because we've seen it for years with teams not wanting to move guys in division, not wanting to move guys in conference, all those kinds of things. And so, I think for all the teams involved, I think you come out of it looking good. I think, like you said, San Jose needs blue liners, right? Even if, you want to say Marc-Edouard Vlasic is standing in front of him, it is not going to be that hard to get around him. I've watched him play recently. You can just step around him. For San Jose, they need the body. They have a guy that they can get in. He's likely going to, be on that opening night roster next year, and they're going to give him every opportunity to etch a place out for himself on that team. Verbeek got a third-round pick. I love it, man. There's nothing about this that's bad to me. I think this is.
We talked about it with the Sharks earlier with Jake's comment that they should be adding to the cupboards. Like, again, if you think Thrun is worth more than your 2024 third-round pick and you can get him into the roster as soon as next season, this is the moves the Sharks should be making to fill the cupboard with players. It makes sense. I do love it from Thrun to go to the team early and give him a chance to get something. There's obviously a mutual respect there for how they've treated him over the last few years because he's had some issues with his NCAA time and leaving. He was at Northeastern or something like that, I think, before. There was an issue with where he was before, then going to Harvard, and then going back to the USHL, and with COVID and everything, and I'm sure they helped him through that. So there's a mutual respect there, I think, from the team and the player, for the player to let them know, and for Verbeek and the team to be like, listen, where do you want to go? What places are you interested in signing? And we'll try and make a deal with one of those teams. And then for Verbeek, again, like you said, I don't care that this is a division rival. This is the best offer we're getting. We're going to take it. Player's fine going there. Let's get it done, and ultimately it's a win for all teams.
And I forgot to mention this. I don't remember who it was. Oh, it was Sheng Peng. I hope I said that right. Who writes for who covers the Sharks for, I think it's like the San Jose Daily News or something like that. Yeah. But he said that this makes a lot of sense from the San Jose point of view because Todd Marchant is their director of player development now. And Marchant was the guy who was there when Thrun was drafted. So that's very interesting to me that after Marchant is let go by the team, he goes somewhere else, and he seems to have taken one of the prospects with him. And I just think that's interesting.
I didn't even know that. But
I'm not saying it was anything shady or anything like that. I just think it's very interesting that he did end up somewhere with someone that he knew from the organization already.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm sure when the trade conversation is happening, Mike Greer is not oblivious to the fact that Todd Marchant was a part of the team.
I highly doubt it.
Hey, what do you think of this guy? And I'm sure, obviously, the way it worked out, there was some glowing remarks. Listen, I love Henry Thrun. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be an NHL defenseman in this league. I think the Ducks got him at a steal where they drafted him, but to get increased value from where they drafted him, you get a third for where you draft him in the fourth. That's good. And for the Ducks, it's not this year, it's next year, but still, again, they need picks this year. They need picks next year. There's a long road to get back. And the Ducks' success lately in the second, third, and fourth round, I'm fine getting another swing at it to get another guy into the system. So, it's a good one. We had to talk about that
Tyson
one.
Hines, Sasha Pastujov, their names to be excited.
And they've both been on the rise since being drafted, too. So it's been great. All right. Big Oilers trade. They finally get their defensive defenseman, their shutdown two-way type guy, Matthias Ekholm. Again, a testament to the struggles the Predators have had this year. Not a guy at the beginning of the year you would have thought would have been on the move, but he goes to the Oilers at 4% retained. I love it. I love that. $250K retained because he's got some term. I think he's got a few more years left on that deal.
Yeah, he just signed this extension. I'm pretty sure this is the first year of his 8-year extension.
Let me
double check.
No, he's gone 4 years. He's on a 4 year. So this is the first year of a 4-year deal.
Oh, okay, okay.
He was.
But it was the first year of an extension. Yes. Okay.
So they're paying him $6 million. I got to go find the trade again here. They got a 6th round pick. The Oilers did in 2024. Tyson Barrie goes back to the Preds essentially to make the cap work and provide a little bit more value there. Reed Schaefer, who is one of the kind of, I think he's a top 5 prospect for the Oilers. They don't have a deep prospect pool. He goes to the Preds. The Preds also get their Oilers 2023 first and a 2024 fourth round pick. So I do like the value for the Preds a lot. You get a prospect who's, again, whether he's a top 50 prospect in the league, I don't think matters. When you're trading with the team, if you can get one of their top 3 or top 5 prospects, right, you're getting value there based off what they have in their system. Getting a first is great because that's not guaranteed to be a late first. We've talked about the Oilers and their struggles. It could be, a 20 to 25 range pick. That's good for the Preds to start rebuilding their system. Tyson Barrie gives you a player who can step into your lineup now, and if they still want to try and make a run and try and compete, or you can flip him later, right? Flip another flippable asset. He only makes $4.5 million, so there's some chance to move him around. And again, you mentioned with defensemen, if there's anywhere you want to bring a defenseman who's has had the success that Tyson Barrie has had and try and revive that, Nashville's probably the place to do that. We'll exclude PK Subban from that list, but
no, you aren't, because his first year in Nashville, he was a fucking Norris candidate.
Yeah,
his body just fucking broke,
fell apart,
which just so sad, man. Oh.
But I like this trade a lot.
Real quick, we're gonna take a tiny 20-second tangent. I just want to ask you this straight up and down: is PK Subban a Hall of Famer?
I don't know. I can't. I don't feel right saying off the top of my head, not looking at everything altogether. I would say probably no. Just not knowing, his numbers off the top of my head and everything like that. But I would say no. I don't think he gets in. Definitely not first ballot, I don't think. I mean, he would be up relatively soon, right? So. American
sympathizer Eddie Jones says Canada sucks. Jeez.
I'd love to see him get there. I don't know if
I think he's a Hall of Famer.
I don't know if he's done enough, but
to me,
it wouldn't
his
shock
peak
me.
Plus his celebrity,
put
him in. Like, to me, and I don't say celebrity lightly. Like, I really do think he is one of the people who made the NHL matter in a way for people it didn't matter before. And that's not even about him being black. That's just about him being interesting.
Yeah, he was a personality for the NHL in a time where they didn't have a lot of personality.
No. I think it was...
I mean, they still don't, but there's definitely more
Sean
guys
McAdoo
now. So.
Who made the comment that, like, one of the greatest lines in recent NHL history was, "I can't wait to go into that building and take everything away from them," when they were playing Boston, when he was in Montreal. Just... Oh, it's beautiful. I love PK.
Prime PK was scary to play against.
He was.
Yeah, he was something else, man.
He was special.
But Ekholm, what do you think of Ekholm for Oilers?
I like it. I think it's a great thing. I think, because there were, out of like the 32 Thoughts podcast, there was a lot of talk about how, I guess, Draisaitl and McDavid had gone to Holland and said, like, if you bring us somebody who can skate the puck out. Yeah. Do not bring us somebody who's going to bang it off the glass. We need puck movers, which is why the Erik Karlsson thing had so much leverage steam behind it, right? And so I think this is a really good thing, because Mattias Ekholm can skate with the puck. He can transition the puck from one end to the other, but he's also the best defenseman on that team now. And that does a lot for them. And that, I think, this is, one of the better moves of the deadline in terms of quality of player and fit. He's going to do a thing that they need him to do very badly, which is play defense. And he's not really giving up a ton. I know I saw a couple of people say that, it's weird they moved out Tyson Barrie because he was their power play quarterback for the number one power play. I get that technically he was, but, like, they have a power play with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. They don't.
Evan Bouchard can do exactly what Tyson Barrie did.
Exactly.
And should be, honestly, the way he's played.
Yes.
They need to start transitioning into that.
Yes,
I mean, Darnell Nurse can play power play one if they needed to. Yeah. Mattias Ekholm could, like that. Like you said, they're playing with Nuge, they're playing with McDavid, with Draisaitl. Like, it's dumb maybe to say it doesn't matter who you put back there, because if you put Cody Ceci back there, like that's probably not the best thing. But at a level, like there's no difference really to putting Bouchard or Ekholm or Nurse back there. Like they'll do enough of a job to get it done.
Right.
But I think Bouchard is just as good, if not better, than Tyson Barrie, and deserves to be on that power play one. So I think it's a great team. I think it's a great trade for both. I think for the Preds to get a first and Reed Schaefer and then a flippable asset in Tyson Barrie is really good for them. And, you know, the Oilers had to send Tyson Barrie the other way for the cap to work. And my favorite part of the deal, like we mentioned in the beginning, was the 4% retaining. For that.
Which comes up later, by the way, because they added, I can't remember who it was, but they added, Bugstad.
Yeah.
They added Bugstad, and that $250,000 retained was exactly enough to get Bugstad in to be a bottom of the roster player for them. So yeah, great, love it.
All right, the one we talked about briefly at the beginning, Patrick Kane from the Blackhawks to the New York Rangers, with a brief stop of all places. That usually how it goes, the Arizona Coyotes. Now a long list of the players who are Arizona Coyotes legends but have never played a game for the team, like Chris Pronger and Pavel Datsyuk, and a long list of those guys. The Blackhawks get Vili Saarjärvi from Arizona. They get our boy Andy Welinski.
I know, I saw that. I don't know how I didn't know he was in this trade until I was looking right now. I was like, hey, shout out to Andy Welinski.
A 2023 conditional second that it upgrades to a 2024 first, top 10 protected, or a 2025 first if the Rangers make the Eastern Conference Final. So not bad. There's a good chance that they could. So you might still get the first for Kane, which isn't the worst thing. And then a 2025 fourth-round pick. Kane, like I said, brief stop in Arizona where they retained 50% of it. For that, they got a 2025 third, conditional third from the Rangers. The condition is something to do with if they'll get the better of the Rangers or Dallas, and there's a further condition on that pick regarding to Lundqvist's success in Dallas. So there's a long list of conditions on that trade. Ultimately, it was a third to the Coyotes for retaining a significant portion of the salary. The Blackhawks got a conditional second, a fourth, and Andy Welinski, and the Rangers get the big piece there, Patrick Kane, for this year, only making $2.625 billion. So everybody wins out there. King goes where he wants to go. The Blackhawks get something decent in return, and the Coyotes step in, as they always do, to get something for their millions of dollars of cap space.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rangers add Tarasenko and Kane in one deadline, which is
so that was the thing. That was the thing for me, because I think it was Wish or somebody made the comment well, it's weird that they're adding Patrick Kane after they said basically adding Tarasenko meant that they didn't have to add Patrick Kane. And it's like, no, that's not weird. That's genius.
Yeah, they didn't think they would.
Because now they get to call Chicago and go, hey, you know that guy that we weren't going to pay you through the nose for because we got this other guy? I mean, we'll take him, but we still have the other guy. And that's genius to me. I think going out, making a strong deal for Tarasenko, improving the quality of the team, getting a player that a lot of people thought was going to be more effective than Patrick Kane. We talked about it, the Tarasenko deal, that we thought it made a lot of sense because it just brings in goals. Mm-hmm. And they still went out and got Patrick Kane.
Yeah.
Kane
helped that situation a lot by publicly coming out saying he was not happy about the Tarasenko trade because he wanted to go there. That definitely helps your leverage as a general manager to call him up and be like, this guy only wants to come here. But for the Rangers, man, you get to reunite Panarin and Kane, and you've added Tarasenko to the other line.
This is my thing about that. How great do you think it is right now to be Artemi Panarin and to be like, oh, these two great players wanted to come play with me because I'm special.
And
the thing is none of them are a fucking center. Chicago. So I can't wait till Gerard Gallant runs out just the three wingers with no center.
Yeah, because he's got Zibanejad and Trocheck, so he's fine there. But the rest of it is Hedl is a center winger essentially at that point. But man, that top six, you're talking Kreider, Zibanejad, Tarasenko, Panarin, Trocheck, Kane, that's
That's absurd.
That's some serious cup potential right there. You've got Shesterkin in net. You've got Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba and Adam Fox on the blue line. Like, they are good. They are a good team. And once Tarasenko started to get rolling, had a slow start, he's really kind of pushed on in the last couple games. Kane just got there. Like, the end of the season for this team could be huge. And Shesterkin hasn't even been that great this year. Like, he really hasn't been at the same level as what he was last year.
Right.
If he gets going and he gets hot, and he has the potential to do so with the scoring talent this team has now. Their blue line is great. Like, they are a threat for me. Looking like as good as Boston has been, like, I look at the Rangers and say this is a legitimate team. Like, they have a very good chance of going far. But there's a lot of them in the East. There's a lot of those teams that have a real good chance of making something happen here. So
yeah, I think I think the Rangers are in that same group now with Carolina of being like, there is every reason to think that this team could make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
And like, I just want to do this real quick. I think if you're a Rangers fan or a hockey fan in general, seeing the Tarasenko trade gave you a lot of hope that you weren't going to add Patrick Kane, who is a very easy person to dislike.
Yeah.
For a number of different reasons, not the least of which being sexual assault allegations, physical assault allegations, dressing in blackface for a fucking Halloween party. Like, there's a lot with him that is just not great. And I don't it was one of the, I think it was the podcast that Andrew Chelney does. And I can't remember who the other guy is, but the other guy made a whole thing of like, look, this sucks. And if it bums you out, I totally get it. And I just want you to know that, like, I back you on that. And I think that's really important because, like, this is a business. Patrick Kane is a good hockey player. Chris Drury's responsibility is to the team and to the organization to put them in the best position possible to win. And I don't think you can say adding Patrick Kane doesn't do that. But there is the part of this where it's also like, as fans, we are emotionally invested, which leads to us being financially invested. And to see a team add someone who it is very easy to be like, look, dude, he already had a Hall of Fame career. He might be the greatest American hockey player of all time. We didn't need to give him more shit. Like, we don't need to make him a bigger deal. He hasn't, you know what I mean? Like, it's weird and it sucks. And I, to this day, am still afraid that Anaheim is going to sign him because he's Trevor Zegras' hero. I am still in fear of that.
I don't know. We go into this offseason, he's an unrestricted free agent. You never know.
I know. And, it's just a weird thing. And I just think it is important, especially like us who, we're not making money off the league, so we don't really have any responsibility to try to be hyper objective or anything about this stuff. Like, I just think it's important to say that it does suck to see this happen, and it is going to suck that as he continues to play well, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be excited beyond belief to completely ignore all of the other shit and just be like, Patrick Kane, the Rangers, we're back.
Yeah.
And that sucks. And I feel for people who are going to struggle with that kind of thing, because it is one of the weird part of sports that I don't know, because of the hyper visibility of the players and the people in the league. Like, I don't mean this to be glib or dismissive, but like, we all know that whatever our favorite movie is, whatever our favorite band is, whatever our favorite piece of food is, there are probably people involved with the creation of that on some level who suck.
Yeah.
And suck in these specific ways, right? Not they were a jerk to me. This is like, they seem like they could be gross people.
Yeah.
But we don't know about them. So it's easier to keep a cognitive dissonance. This isn't that. And so while part of me is like, why is it different? But that's why it's different. Because these people are in our face in a very meaningful way. They're in our lives in a very meaningful way, even if it is parasocial bullshit. We care about these teams a lot. And to see those teams do things like this can be very frustrating and can be very disconcerting for a lot of fans. And I think that matters, and I think that's valid. So
yeah, no, 100%. I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, it's funny because you think it would give excitement, and talk about giving excitement, the Rangers being at the forefront of everybody's name. You look at ESPN, and did you see that clip from First Take?
Please don't make me talk about this, because I hate the reaction that hockey fans have had to that clip. It's so fucking stupid.
No, it is, but it's just hilarious.
Does not give a shit about hockey.
This is nothing new. This is nothing new. He's never cared about hockey.
Stephen A. Smith is not a hockey fan. First Take is a Stephen A. Smith vessel.
Yep.
And to act like, because Molly Curum, I think her name's Molly Curum, was like, they don't count because Steven doesn't care about them. So let's just stick to the teams that Steven cares about on his show, by the way. Again, his show. That's not unfair to me. And I think it's disingenuous to be like, oh, I guess ESPN doesn't care. Really? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen a lot of, right. I've seen ESPN pour a lot of money and a lot of time and effort and resources into improving the quality of ESPN coverage of hockey. Like, Emily has been one of the biggest stars. Emily Kaplan has been one of 100%. The biggest stars from this hockey season in the best way possible. Arda Ocal, Greg Wyshynski. We've got, what's my beautiful man's name? Barry Melrose. They've got Messier. They've got Chelios. Like, they
Subban's on there now as well, is he not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you've got Steve Levy. Like, ESPN cares. ESPN is putting time and energy and money into hockey. Stephen A. Smith doesn't have to fucking care, man.
90% of First Take coverage is NBA and NFL, and then maybe some baseball thrown in there.
Right.
And that's it. That's it. And again, it is like 80-85% NBA. And that's Stephen A's thing. That's what he wants to cover. That's his show. If anything you could pull out of the ESPN blanket and say anything that's said on that show doesn't represent ESPN and what they think as a whole, it's First Take, 100%. Like, the reaction was ridiculous. I thought it was funny. I just loved it. Like, I knew the reaction was coming at that point. Listen, he's not wrong. What New York team has the best chance of winning a championship is 100% the Rangers.
Well, here's the fun thing. Who was it? I think it was Marissa and Jemmy said that technically the answer should be the Liberty, because they just added Stewie and somebody. I can't think of who else they just added, but they added somebody stupid talented else besides Stewie to that team. So, like, really, it's the WNBA team who was the team most likely to win a championship in New York next. After that, yeah, then it's probably the Rangers. But yeah, so, whatever. It is what it is. I hated that whole conversation. It was so stupid. People are just so in their feelings about it, and I don't understand it.
You knew it was going to happen. This one, I love it because I think they fumbled the ball, and I love seeing this team fumble it. The Kings not going for Chychrun, having a deal on the table that almost got accepted with the Coyotes. I don't know. Obviously, we don't know what it was. Didn't come to fruition. Ultimately, Chychrun, we'll get to it, goes to the Sens. Instead, LA opts to bring Gavrikov and Korpisalo in, sending a 2023 conditional first. The conditions, if the Kings do not qualify for this year's playoffs, Columbus will receive a 2023 second and a 2024 second. The odds of that likely aren't going to happen. And they also got a 2024 third-round pick and Jonathan Quick.
God.
That was the fascinating part of that. Who, by the way, did not want to be traded.
No,
did
very
not
much
want to
did
go
not.
Anywhere. But it's too good, I think, to pass up for Columbus. They got a first and a third for Gavrikov and Korpisalo, right? You basically get a third for Korpisalo and a first for Gavrikov, and you get Jonathan Quick, who you flipped for a seventh or something like that to Vegas. But it's crazy deal.
And worst case, so this is the other thing that was funny, because this is kind of like, again, the context, because of the way the drafts work, are very different. But if the first doesn't convey, it turns into 2 seconds is a thing that's been in the NBA for 20 years. Yeah. So, like, it's very funny to see that. But because second-round picks mean more in the NHL draft than they do in the NBA draft, if for no other reason than the NBA draft is 2 rounds and teams don't even always sign their second-round draft picks, even if it does turn into 2 seconds and a third,
it's not bad.
That's great. That's fine. You're happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the price of defensemen, it felt like it was going to be up here, and then it quickly went down here. For Gavrikov to still get either a first or 2 seconds is huge. It's huge.
So I guess here's because like I think we've said this is a good deal for the Kings in a sense. You feel like it's a missed opportunity because they didn't go for Chychrun.
Yes.
I would simply say this: would you rather have Chychrun right now or Gavrikov right now and still have Brandt Clarke and Quinton Byfield and Alex Turcotte? You know what I mean? Like,
I think that all things like it seems like they would have kept those guys because the Coyotes only wanted draft picks. They didn't want players, is what it came down to. Bill Armstrong, I don't know if it was an interview or what, but was quoted as saying that they would rather have multiple draft picks than to have a prospect and less draft picks, which is why they got a first, second, and a third from the Sens. And they liked the Sens picks better of where the Sens are. They felt they were better to get a higher pick from Ottawa than from LA, and that's ultimately why they ended up going that route. So do I think the Kings lost?
But here's my question. Do you think Byfield and Clarke are of the quality of prospect that they don't count towards that? Because I do. Because especially with how everything played out, I personally think that Armstrong leaked the Brandt Clarke shit.
Oh, probably.
To me, that is him doing that to try to force the Kings' hands, which, don't mind, that's the game for him. Like, I feel bad for Brandt Clarke that he had to go through that. That's not fun, especially at that young age. Like, that's, and he's had a real nice year between juniors and the U20s and all that shit. Yeah. He's had a real nice year, so that's not fun. But that's the game. And it sounds like a big part of it is they didn't want to take back Cal Peterson, because that's the other thing he said is they didn't have to take back money in that Chychrun trade, which is something they didn't want to do. They wanted to keep expenses low as could be, and we can get into all that later on when we get to the board check trade and shit.
Yeah.
But like I think this is a better trade for LA than adding Chychrun is. Now, you can say Brandt Clarke's a righty and they need left-handed defensemen, which is why they signed Mikey Anderson to that extension and all kinds of stuff. But like, I would rather have those two guys and Gavrikov than Chychrun, for me personally.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad trade.
Gaudy's almost out.
I'm just not a
Kopitar's almost out. Like,
yeah,
those are who those two guys are hopefully going to replace. Brandt Clarke hopefully steps in as your number one power play quarterback.
And Byfield replaces Kopitar, yeah.
Kopitar. So,
I think it's fine. It's not a bad deal. I'm not a huge fan of Gavrikov. I'm not a huge fan of Korpisalo. Maybe in a better system and a better defensive system the way LA plays. Mm-hmm. That I think it does suit them. I think Korpisalo can be good. I think in a team that's defensively structured in front of him, the way the Kings are, he could be better. The Kings, I think, they're in the top 5 in the lowest shots against allowed in the league, so that will help Korpisalo. Gavrikov fits kind of the way they play, so I do think as a fit, it's good. I just think we've talked about how great a fit Jakob Chychrun would be in that system. Yes. So that's a tough opportunity to miss out on. But I mean, ultimately, we might as well move into this. Ultimately, like, he goes to the Sens, which is another great. Like, I love it. Again, the Sens are loaded on the left. Awesome. Whatever, they've got Sanderson, Shabbat, Chychrun, but you can't pass this up. Like, no. They get Jakob Chychrun straight out, just Chychrun, for a 2023 conditional first, a 2024 conditional second, and a 2026 second round pick. So the conditions are: the first round pick this year is top 5 protected. If the condition is met, the pick becomes an unprotected 2024 first. We've seen the Sens do this before. Ultimately, with the Sharks, right, in the Carlson deal, how they picked Brady Tkachuk, and that pick became a pick the next year for the Sharks. And then if Ottawa, the condition on the second for next year is if Ottawa makes the 2023 Eastern Conference Final, the pick becomes a 2024 first top 10 protected. If the pick is top 10, then it becomes a 2025 first-round pick. So the same conditions of the first apply to the second if it becomes a first. I think it's good for Arizona in the sense they were always asking for 2 firsts, whether it was a first and a prospect of first-round value or 2 first-round picks. They essentially get that. If things go well for the Sens and they make the Eastern Conference Final, they get 2 firsts and a second, which I think is good value for Chychrun. If they don't, a first and 2 seconds is fairly close to the same value as well. And that just means Ottawa isn't doing as well. So that second, you love to hear it, but that second will be higher up towards a first-round pick anyway. Yep. So I think with the number of teams interested in Jakob Chychrun, the price ended up inevitably coming down from the astronomical expectations that Arizona thought they were going to get for him. I think what they got was fairly good, and if you think the Sens have the best chance of you getting a higher first-round pick, I think that's fine. Ultimately, Ottawa clear winners now because getting a player like Jakob Chychrun and adding it to Chabot and Sanderson, it's going to be huge for them. That's a huge win for them to add to the blue line. And I watched the first couple games he's played for them. He's looked great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, especially if you're Ottawa, having guys who are excited to come to Ottawa because they have family there. There was a photo that went out of, I think it might have been either his mom or his wife shared it. I don't know if he's married, so it might not be his wife. It might have just been his mom. But, he got to have lunch with his grandpa.
Yeah.
Bro, that's cool as hell. You get to go. Because here's the thing I remember a while back. I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was Jalen Rose talking about NBA. Not every player wants to go home. Mm-hmm. Because going home means all those people are a lot closer. Sometimes it's nice to have that distance because then you don't have to worry about, hey, man, can you get me into the game tonight? Or, hey, you know what I mean? It's once, maybe 2-3 times a year when you're traveling. That's it. So for Ottawa, who is a team that has struggled to retain players, is a team that has struggled to stay consistently competitive, to add in a 24-year-old top pair defenseman with term who wants to be in Ottawa is huge. Now, because there is term, he can always want to leave by the end of it.
Yeah.
So it is your responsibility now as an organization to make sure you're getting this team on the right track so that when it's time to offer him that extension, he's like, yes, I see where we're headed. Let's keep doing this. But you're not going to get much better than a top pair. Maybe if you want to say he's a top 4 because he's more of a 2-3-ish than a 1-2. That's fine. I'm not going to, necessarily push back on that too much. It's huge for them. It means a lot for Ottawa. He plays defense, which we know that they needed. Mm-hmm. He's young. He fits in with that timeline as far as the window. He's probably only going to get better over the next couple of years because he's still, again, I still think the prime for a defenseman doesn't start until about 26. I don't give a shit about aging curves. It's all stupid. None of it means anything to me. I do not care. I think this is a great trade for them. And I want to shout out Mike Gould, who writes for, I think, Flames Nation and Daily Faceoff, who covers Arizona. And he put out a kind of a trade breakdown for Daily Faceoff about this trade and about how, after a year and a half of them saying how much they wanted. Because, again, at one point it was 4 firsts or the equivalent.
Yeah.
And, again, I think that is public posturing. And as I said to him, the reason you say something absurdly high like that is so you have room to come down without losing, without taking yourself out of the knees. Because if it's 2 firsts, you don't have a lot of room to come down. If it's 3 firsts, you have a little bit more. 4 firsts, you have plenty of room to move down. And you can always pull some PR bullshit of, this guy was taken in the 3rd round, but we think he's really a higher quality. As Anaheim fans, we're very familiar with that, and I don't think it's unfair. Sure, Zellweger was taken in the 2nd round, or Pastujov was taken in the 3rd round, but really, there's no reason they shouldn't have been a late first kind of player. Look at how they've played, blah, 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 blah. That's great.
Yeah.
You give yourself that flexibility. And again, you said it, and Mike said it, and I think it's important to remember that Ottawa pick is going to be better than any of the other picks they were going to have a shot at. And especially with what we know about the absurdly precipitous fall off in value just in the first round alone, being able to move from the 25, 26, 27 pick to a 13, 14, 15 pick is huge. They have a real opportunity here to go into this draft with 2 top 12, top 13 picks, and this is exactly the draft to do that. Especially when they have Logan Cooley, they've got Dylan Genther, they've got guys that they can start to build around. Mm-hmm. This is a great way to add 2 more of those guys to that core like that.
Well, the great thing, too, is that 2023 first is just top 5 protected. The Sens aren't in a playoff spot. There's no guarantee they make it. If they don't win the lottery, that's a 10 to 15 pick, right? Like, that's a very good pick for Arizona. And it's this year in a deeper draft, a guy you can get into your system right away and add to the guys that you've just drafted, the Logan Cooleys. Clayton Keller's obviously still in the system, right? You get that guy in right away. And then that 2024 second could become a first if Ottawa does well. So you're protected on both ends. If they don't do well, you get a higher first this year. If they do well and they make the playoffs and they go far, you get another first, and it's next year added into it. So you're protected on either end. Whether the Sens, you make the Sens better with this trade and they go far, or they don't make the playoffs, you're fine either way, right? You just get a higher first. If they don't make the playoffs, you get a higher first this year, and that second stays a second. If they do well, you get a lower first this year, and you have a chance to get another first next year. The only downside for Arizona, the worst case, if you want to call it that, the Sens make the playoffs, get to the second round, get eliminated. Then it's still a first, a second, and it's a later first, right? That's the worst case, but either way, you still got a first and 2 seconds for Jake.
Yeah, and again, there's no reason to think that next year's second won't be between 33 and 40.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, look at the division they're in too, right?
Still going to be in a bad spot.
Boston, Tampa, Toronto are all in their primes. They have to basically make a wild card to get in.
What did fucking Steve Yzerman just say? Which, again, we can get up to this a little bit later, but I think it's the Hronek trade, which is one of the next couple ones. Or maybe the Bertuzzi trade.
We're doing Hronek and Bertuzzi together after this. So
okay. But Steve Yzerman flat out said, I'm looking at this team, and I'm looking at Buffalo and Ottawa, and they're ahead of us right now. Mm-hmm. So the best thing I can do is put my team in a position to where when we're actually in that race, we are in a position to actually compete.
Yep.
That rocks, man. I think that kind of self-awareness is awesome. I think that kind of honesty is awesome. And I don't think he's wrong.
He's not.
And to that point, I think there's a world in where Detroit jumps Ottawa next year, right? I don't think it's completely out of the question. And if that happens, you're looking at that Ottawa pick being 36, 37, 38. And that's huge, man. That's great.
Yeah. There's something to be said about timing of building a team. And like you said, having the self-awareness to understand, like, listen, if you're in Ottawa's case, yeah, this makes you better now. But how quickly do we jump into that mix? Because we are legs behind Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay of getting to that level. They've been there. They've done that. They've made the playoffs. Can we go up?
Florida, by the way, is still in that mix, which is fucked up.
Can we go up against them now, or should we slow it down a little bit and hope one or two of them fall off and look more, like you said, at Buffalo or Detroit and say that's who we're going to be competing with when we're the 3 horses in the race? And we can move right into the 2 trades. The Yzer plan is in full effect. Hronek was a surprise, goes out the door. They get a first and a second for Hronek. A fourth goes the other way. That's very good value for the Red Wings. A guy who's had a great season for them, a guy you would normally say, like, you should keep this guy around. But he's 26, and like you said, Yzerman says, okay, it might be 4 or 5 years before we're competing and we're ready to go. Let's get some of these guys. We get a first and a second, both in this year, from a team that's not doing that good in Vancouver, that we can now flip around and turn into players that can be on our roster in 3 or 4 years when we are competing, right? Maybe we get another Hronek added to the team. Edvinson's going to come up next year, right? And then you've got a younger core at that point. And then Bertuzzi's the same boat. Again, a little bit older, a player like you normally say you wouldn't maybe want to move. You saw the press conference from Larkin, like he's got a good relationship with the guys.
That dude, man. That sucked to see.
Larkin just signs a long-term.
I love Dylan Larkin. I don't like Tyler Bertuzzi. Yeah. I like Dylan Larkin. I did feel very bad for Larkin having to sit there and just be like, hey, can you guys just give me a second? Because my best friend just got traded and this fucking sucks.
Yeah. But you get a first this year, a first next year. You get a second this year and a fourth next year for Bertuzzi and Hronek. Good bit of business, I think, for Yzerman. We're used to it. Man, he did well. And again, for the fit, Hronek to Vancouver, if they were competitive, I can see it. Him playing beside Quinn Hughes, like team-wise, I like it. The position they're in, it makes no sense. I don't know why they did it, but it's the Canucks. Bertuzzi to Boston is, again, like we said with Hathaway, like that makes sense, man. Like that's such a good trade for them. I hate to say it, but I'm not a huge Bertuzzi fan. I'm not a Bruins fan. But when you put the two players together, like it just makes sense. He might not even play in the top six, and that's perfectly fine to be a third line guy and a second power play guy for them. Man, that's great for the Bruins. Not maybe sure if it's the best fit for Tyler Bertuzzi to get the best out of himself. Guy goes from playing first line to third line, but he has the best chance of any player traded, right, to win a Stanley Cup. He's going to the best team in the league. So I'm sure you sacrifice some of that personal success there to play as a role player, a very good role player in a competitive team, and win a Stanley Cup. I think most guys would rather do that than stay in Detroit and play on the top line and play for nothing this year.
Yeah, and I fuck, you made me think of like two different things right now. So the first thing I want to say before I get into the other thing, because I think that takes a little bit longer, I actually do think for Bertuzzi there is something to be said for next. Like I think it's more than likely that he'll sign some kind of a decent extension to kick around, and because it's Boston, because they're competitive, because they've got the juice, I do think they'll be able to get him to sign it a little bit below what might be considered market value. If your first year, really, post-Bergeron and post-Krejci, your top lines, wingers, are Marchand, Pasternak, Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi, you have created an opportunity now to where you can bring in centers to try to help bring these along. Those are two pairs of wingers that can help get more out of a good center, right? Like similar to kind of the Phil Deneau thing, right? You can bring in somebody who maybe doesn't have the high end top six center type profile, but he is a good enough player and a strong enough defensive player that you can put in between two really good wingers, and he's going to be able to keep up with them, create space for them, and now you've got two sets of wingers in your top two lines that can pretty much do it all. And I think that's really exciting for them. The other thing I want to say is, and this was what we were talking about as far as like the self-awareness of the timeline. This is, and again, it's weird because it's Tampa Bay and it's Yzerman. This is actually the inverse of the Jeannot trade, which is we are not competing right now. So let's move this guy. Let's get in a bunch of these picks. You know what I mean? Like you said, they added, 2 firsts, a second, and a fourth or something like that. They bring those picks in. Now those are guys who could maybe be on ELCs, which are incredibly valuable when this team is really pushing, when Raymond takes that step, when Larkin's going to be on that extension. He's going to be making a lot of money.
Yeah, Edvinsson gets up to Sider.
Exactly. Yeah. Sider's going to be on that next deal. Edvinsson's going to be close to getting an extension around that point. This is where having these picks and these young guys on ELCs can be very valuable, especially for a team in Detroit, which with Yzerman there does trust their drafting.
Yeah.
So I think what you're seeing is two sides of the same coin, and I think they both make sense.
Nope, I 100% agree with that. The surprising approach to the deadline from the Red Wings, but one that makes complete sense, right? Like I didn't expect them to sell Bertuzzi and Hronek, but when you look at it and look at the picture of that division and the future of the teams in that division, it makes sense for them to do that. And like you said, huge props to Yzerman for the self-awareness to understand, like, this makes more sense now for us to do this. This hurts our team, and it makes us worse, and that's a hard thing to do when you actually had, all things considered, a decent year. You're above 500, but you get picks in the next couple drafts that are going to help you, like you said, when you're trying to be competitive again. This one's
real quick.
Go ahead.
I'm going to steal because I want to do two trades together real quick, just because I think they're none of them use the same teams, but I think they're actually pretty analogous. Colorado trades a second-round pick to the Capitals for Lars Eller, and Carolina trades a third-round pick to Arizona for Shane Gostisbehere. Both of those guys are not top-of-the-line of guys, but they are both very sorry, it's not fair. Lars Eller is a very responsible bottom six center who is going to be able to come in, eat big minutes, improve your penalty kill, that kind of stuff. Shane Gostisbehere is going to come in. He's going to be able to play either side of the ice. He's going to add some offensive dynamism. This is a team that just added Brent Burns. Yep. This is a team that just lost Max Pacioretty. Like, this is a team that is very clearly looking at themselves and going, we need offense.
Yeah, and from the blue line, they rely heavily on Brent Burns to do that. And they needed another guy to do that, yeah.
I think these are two trades that aren't particularly splashy, aren't particularly sexy, but just make a lot of sense for all four teams involved. And I think what we've now seen is two legitimate contenders get a little bit better, which is what you want out of that deadline. Mm-hmm. You want to just get a little bit better.
Yep,
you can get a lot better, that's great, but that's hard to do.
Yeah, the Avalanche desperately needed a reliable middle six center after losing Kadri. They needed somebody, and I think Lars Eller, again, playoff success, win all the way with Washington. Mm-hmm. You know, again, he fits into the types of guys they like to bring in there. I think he'll do well. A guy who isn't that bad. Like, he is a middle six guy. He's a second or third line center. You don't want him to be your second line center, but you can put him there and he can do a job, right? And then Shane Gostisbehere makes so much sense for Carolina to get a little bit more offense out of your blue line. He doesn't have to be the main guy. Brent Burns is the main guy. Gostisbehere can be a second power play guy and really do his thing. And if something happens to Brent Burns, you have the confidence that he's done it and can step up and be a power play one guy, and you're not any bit concerned of him having to do that. So yeah, man, I think it's a great fit. The other one I think was borderline that I was going to talk about was Max Domi to the Stars for a second round pick and Antoine Khudobin, but like, it doesn't really, it doesn't move the needle too much for me. Like, I like it for the Stars,
sense, but like, I don't like Max Domi, so I'm perfect. I don't like that a team that me and you have a lot of affinity for, and especially for me, because Jason Robertson is from out here near where I'm from. Yeah. I want nothing but the best for him. And again, similar to what Brett Hull and Mike Modano were able to mean to Dallas, I think it's really cool to have Pavelski and Robertson to, one, a major part of a generation of American players, the other, a major part of this next generation of American players being able to be competitive. If Max Domi makes them a little bit better, great. I don't like Max Domi. Yeah. I think, if nothing else, we'll always have the highlight of him one-punch KOing Ryan Kessler, which remains just like, it happened, and I was furious, and I'm still furious that it happened. But it is one of the best punches I've ever seen in an NHL game. Yeah. All that being said, I hope Max Domi does absolutely nothing, and I hope it doesn't really mess with the Stars altogether too much.
It should.
But he's going to bring physicality. He's going to bring some skill. He's going to be able to be like a bumper front net guy on a power play. Like, it makes a lot of sense. The cost isn't super high. It's fine. I don't hate it, but I don't like him. So
yeah, no.
Oh, and then real quick, one more thing I want to do, and then I'll give you the reins back. I just want to make sure that we do not skip over my favorite name of this entire deadline, Peter Deliberatore, Peter the Liberator, who I just think is the best name in the world, and he's on the Penguins now in the Teddy Blueger trade. So that's all I want to say. I just wanted to make sure I got to say Teddy Deliberatore as many times as possible.
The Penguins getting a third-round pick for Teddy Bluger was a nice piece of work for them too. Undrafted guy, right? Penguins always find these guys from somewhere. I've only got one more trade outside of the two Ducks trades to cover, and it's from two teams we both kind of like, and we've talked about the Wild a ton. But Jordan Greenway going to the Sabres for a 2023 second and 2024 fifth. I like it for both. I think it is a lot for Greenway when you look at the prices of players, but when you look at the Sabres and what they needed a guy like Jordan Greenway. The Wild get a second and a fifth, and they brought in players more, I guess, that they need, right? They got Nyquist. There was I can't remember all the additions they made, but they brought in some more skilled scoring players because they cannot score any goals. They are very difficult to play against. They do that well. They win a lot of one-goal games. They cannot score beyond Kaprizov and Zuccarello and sometimes Matt Boldy. Like that's it. So they brought in some more skill. I think Johansson they brought in Johansson and Nyquist, I think, were their 2 forward additions. At that point, it made sense. Like, Greenway's not going to fit. We've got Foligno and other, Eric Sinek, Ryan Reeves, like a lot of guys who can do that. So they moved him out. They saved $3 million in cap space. It costs they get a 2nd-round pick this year and a 5th-round pick. And then Greenway goes to the Sabres, where they don't have a guy like that, and it's a great fit for him. And the Sabres could push for a playoff spot, man. Like, they're in that hunt.
Yes.
And adding a guy like Greenway, I think, is great for him.
My big thing coming out of this last week has been everybody who roots for a bottom of the standings team should line up behind the Sabres. Now, there are a fair few number of people who have been very upset with me about that comment. One, because Jacob, I can't think of your last name right now, Jacob. I'm so sorry, but he's a huge Ducks fan, and he wants them to extend their playoff drought streak, which 100%, very funny, very petty, love it. I like this Sabres team, and I like Jordan Greenway a lot. I think it's a great ad for them. I think, he's another one of those players where people have been like, well, when you can trade a 2nd-round pick for a guy who's only scored 7 points this year, you got to do it. It's like, that's not – yes, you do want your guys to pitch in more offensively. That's not what he's doing, though. That's not his main responsibility. He's really big, and he's really good. That's the thing. He's not just a 6'6" forward. He's an incredibly responsible defensive 6'6" forward. He is going to eat up a lot of space and a lot of minutes for a team that is going to need someone who can play that style and play those minutes. Uh-oh, my dog's excited. My girlfriend, I think, just got home. So I love it. I'm all in on it. I hope the Sabres go on an insanely stupidly deep run now. There's a lot happening in my apartment right now, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah. I think it's a good trade. It makes a lot of sense, I think. It kind of sucks to see the Wild move on from Greenway, because for a couple of years he was a big part of their identity and what they were doing and being one of those hard teams to play against. But this is, that's the game, man. Like, you got to move people out to get people in. They added Oscar Sundqvist, who's a good player. So I get it. And again, like, if you're Buffalo, man, I think this is exactly the kind of guy you need to go out and get. They've got a lot of young, skilled players who are going to be able to put the puck in the back of the net. Adding depth who can defend is huge for them. So
huge. All right, you got the 2 Ducks trades, and that's it. Dimitri Kulikov, 50% retained to the Penguins. The Ducks get Brock McGinn, who is essentially a salary dump because he was just waived by the Penguins. And in exchange for whatever Kulikov is worth, plus taking on Brock McGinn's contract, they get a 2024 3rd-round pick from the Penguins. Hey, listen, it's fine. Ultimately, like, if you want to say Kulikov probably could have got a 4th or a 5th on his own and you bumped it to a 3rd because you took Brock McGinn, it's not the end of the world. Brock McGinn is a decent player. He's an NHL player. If you want to, at least at the bare minimum, he's an NHL player. Good defensive forward. Put up 20 to 30 points in the season in a really good year for him. He fills a body for the Ducks. They don't have a lot of guys who can really play, and you can say are NHL players at this point. And you get a 3rd-round pick next year from the Penguins. It's nothing major. The Ducks didn't do anything major, really, so we have to kind of talk about it. But I think it works for both teams, and I think for what they got for Kulikov, you got something at least, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my uncle about this when this one went down, and we both kind of had the same thought, which was, to me, you take Kulikov out of this, and it's still the same trade.
Yeah.
I think it's certainly fair to say that getting a defenseman who can play on both sides, play on your bottom pair, play, relatively tough minutes and things like that, is fine. Like, I don't think it's nothing for the Penguins to add him, but I do think fundamentally more than anything, this trade was, we can't afford to keep this $2.75 million for the next 3 years, or this year plus 2 more, because this was the 2nd year of his 4-year deal. We can't afford to keep him here, so we need to move him. Again, like, if you just replace Dimitri Kulikov with future considerations or Anybody from San Diego that's 35 years old or whatever the hell, I don't think it makes a ton of a difference. I think for me it's a little disappointing for two reasons. One, you would have hoped Kulikov could have maybe gotten a little bit more, but to your point, if it's the difference between a fifth and a third is taking on a good bottom six player, then that's fine. I think, if like you're Anaheim right now, what you're looking at is this is the guy who's going to replace Derek Grant moving forward. That's a win. I also liked Kulikov, and I said it to you before, I wouldn't have had any issue with extending him for another year or two to keep him around. I think at this point, as other people have said, I think it's fair to say that that's probably what happens with Shattenkirk now.
Yeah.
Which, again, makes more sense. The right side is leaner than the left side, so that all tracks. But, it's a little disappointing, but I think there's a lot of things regarding Brock McGinn to at least be happy about them, the quality of player that they got back in this trade. So it's fine. It's fine. It sucks. It's a bit of a bummer that they burned a retention slot on the Kulikov deal, but that's the world we live in. So,
and I mean, ultimately,
it's fine.
They moved the two guys you would say they had to move, right? Guys they likely weren't going to bring back, or looked like they weren't going to bring back, in Klingberg and Kulikov. The other expiring contracts, Comtois is an RFA. You don't have to make that decision now. If you don't get what you want, that's fine. Shattenkirk, like you just said, the assumption is that there is a very good chance he could come back and sign an extension. And if you don't get what you want for him and you're fine keeping him around, then if you lose him for nothing, whatever. But seemingly, like, he's done it all. He's won a cup. He seems happy in Anaheim. The Ducks seem happy to have him here.
Does, actually.
And be that, that guy on the right side of defense, and he seems to be a fan for a player's favorite, right, in the locker room. A guy, the team dad, essentially. Like, everything you see from Zegras and these guys, like, their Shattenkirk always seems to be around these guys, hanging out in some way, shape, or form. But so he's the fine, and again, Henrique as well is under contract for the next couple of years, so you don't have to move him either. Same with John Gibson. So they moved all the guys they had to. The last trade was John Klingberg, 50% retained, to the Wild, which is an excellent fit for him. I love that for him as a player. The return is underwhelming, to say the least, for the Ducks. The plan must have been, or what it seemed like, was let's hold off and see if we can hold some team for ransom to get this guy out the door for something more. And all the suitors kind of went off the table, and moved him with 2 minutes before the deadline for whatever you could get, because the Ducks get familiar face Andre Suster in return, a 2025 fourth-round pick, and signing rights to former sixth-round pick Nikita Nestorenko, who's a 21-year-old center from, surprisingly, Brooklyn, New York, with that name, who plays for Boston College. He's just under a point per game this year, has slowly gotten better as his college career goes on, but by no means a top prospect, an intriguing one to say the least. But it is an underwhelming return for John Klingberg, but the market just seemed to dry up for a guy who didn't have a great year in Anaheim. Not many guys have, but
yeah. So this deal sucks.
Yeah,
it sucks. It's a weird thing, because I think there are two opposing thought processes that I think are both fair, and the question is, situationally, which one do you lean into, right? Part of it is, if you set a price for someone and nobody meets it, you shouldn't necessarily go out of your way to take less, because then, going forward, other GMs know that they can just wait you out. Now, again, this is situational, so, it is what it is. The other one being, we signed a guy, we expected to trade him, we needed to get something back. We got a player that apparently, according to Verbeek, he does like Nestorenko. He does like his game. He's added some size and some physicality to his play while he's been at, would you say, BC?
Yep.
So he's intrigued about what this kid could be. 5th-round pick, 4th-round pick, whatever it was, it's fine. It's a lottery ticket. Again, like we said, Maybe they use it and they draft the next Henry Thrun, right? And I'm only saying that because we know he was a 4th-round pick. Maybe they use that and they trade it for, a prospect or a bottom 6 somebody, or maybe somebody else's, college free agent rights are available and they do the same thing that the Sharks did.
Yeah.
It's not without value. The thing for me, and I tried to make this point on Twitter, and I don't think I did a very good job because everybody got mad at me. The decision to add John Klingberg at $7 million was a decision that we are going to bring this guy in. He's going to fill a very big hole for us. He's going to take a lot of that power play and offensive pressure off of Jamie Drysdale. And that's important because we don't want to push Jamie faster or farther than we have to. He's still developing. We need these guys to develop. Jamie obviously gets hurt. That's completely outside. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with it. That's just an unfortunate reality. But it was $7 million to this guy with the expectation that he would get you something at the deadline because of the offensive upside that he provides. He's a right-handed shot. There's a lot there to like. As a lot of people have made sure to point out to me, they spent that money to get to the salary floor. And I don't think that's an unfair point to make. My thing is, there's more than one way to get to the salary floor.
Yep.
And it seems silly to me to ignore the opportunity cost of that $7 million. Because you could have taken on Jake Voracek, right? Now, he only got a 6th-round pick, and he's got, I think, another year left on that deal. But it was Arizona, and it was Columbus, and that deal is what it is. There were opportunities and options to spend that $7 million to get to the salary floor in other ways. It didn't have to be one guy.
Yeah, the premise behind that argument, I feel like, is people think the main reason the Ducks signed John Klingberg was to get to the salary floor. So that's why it's okay that they didn't get a lot from him. No, it's just a byproduct of signing him. They got to the cap floor, and that was one way, like you said, of getting there. The reason they signed him was to trade him and take the risk that he bounces back and you could get something good from him. Ultimately, why I think it's a loss and a disappointment is because you didn't get what you expected you'd get for him.
Right.
The cap floor thing is a point, and it makes sense, but it's
absolutely.
It almost just needs to be taken out of the equation.
It doesn't absolve, in my opinion.
Yeah, because it's not why they signed him. Like you said, there were several other ways they could have got there, but they decided to take the risk of signing this guy, which is totally justifiable to take that risk on this guy that we all thought he could play well enough to get a 1st-round pick. I'd do it again. But the fact that they hit the cap floor with his salary does not justify the fact that they got less than they wanted for him.
Right. Yes, 100%. It was a gamble. It was a calculated gamble. And it just didn't pay off. That happens. That's part of everything, right? We've seen teams sign guys on deals. We've seen guys trade guys away, all sorts of things that were just calculated gambles and ultimately didn't pay off. That's fine. That happens. No such thing as a sure bet. I do think there is some criticism to be made, again, of the opportunity cost of that $7 million and this insistence, like you said, that it was entirely to get to the cap floor, I think is a little misguided. The other question that I have about this, does this make extending Aikens seem like a worse decision? Because we seem to collectively agree that one of the reasons that this team, especially in their own end, hasn't been able to maximize whatever potential is or isn't there is because of Aikens' coaching. I have been incredibly vocally supportive of Aikens. I love all of the other stuff that he brings. As I said earlier this season, which was a very unfortunate realization, I guess, in so much that it bummed me out. On ice terms, the Aikens signing has not worked at any level. the young kids have gotten better. And I think all of the stuff about professionalism and being an everyday NHL player and all that kind of stuff, maturity, I think that's incredibly valuable. And I'm very, very grateful for Aikens. I do wonder if they had a different coach who could maybe get more out of these guys. Are we looking at a better return for John Klingberg?
Yeah, I think he could have been utilized better for sure. Yeah.
So here is my question. What part of this return being underwhelming do we think can I don't want to say this. To what degree is it fair to criticize the underwhelming return in the John Klingberg trade within the context of keeping a coach that, again, while I think he has a lot of benefits, clearly wasn't making everyone better on an X's and O's standpoint? I don't know if that's fair, and I'm very curious to what you think, but it is a thought that I had in this process.
I think it plays a part for sure, because there were times, and I know I saw a lot of people talk about this, the misuse of John Klingberg in a sense. Now listen, Fowler deserved, in all things considered, that power play 1 spot based off of his play and how he has done on the power play versus John Klingberg. Now, if you're trying to maximize the value of your player, John Klingberg should probably be on power play 1 and used that way. And then just his usage in general did not help increase his value. And the way the Ducks are set up and how they are on pace to being historically one of the worst defensive teams, that just doesn't help. You don't have a lot of opportunities to showcase your value. So it does come into play for sure. I can't guarantee it. Obviously, none of us can and say with certainty that another coach increases the value of John Klingberg. But I do think there are ways that this team could have set up or that he could have been used in a different way to increase his value, and you could have gotten more for him. So some of that blame does fall on Dallas Aikens for the low return at that point, and obviously some of it does fall on Pat Verbeek for that not panning out the way that he had expected and we all hoped for. So there are definitely parties to blame for the way things panned out and how it eventually went. I think Dallas Aikens is in that mix. Now, I will say, I am part of the group saying, listen, he was going to get traded. The fact you got anything for him, that's great. I still believe that. I'm still in that camp. It doesn't mean the other can't be true. It doesn't mean it's a disappointing return. 100% is still a disappointing return. I wish we would have gotten more. I think there are situations that could have occurred that we would have gotten more. But ultimately, it is still true. You got something for a guy that you signed to trade. And that is ultimately what you wanted to go out. But yes, the return for him is underwhelming. Really nothing stands out there. Like, yes, Verbeek's going to come out and say he likes Nikita Nesterenko because he's not going to come out and say he doesn't like Nikita Nesterenko. Like,
That's fair. Yeah.
He's a decent college
I don't even fucking
player.
care about this kid. He was a name on a piece of paper. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. When you look at it objectively, he's the only guy they probably could have got because he was not signing in Minnesota. It's the Henry Thornton situation. He was not signing there. They threw him in there because they weren't going to get him signed in Minnesota. He meant, and this isn't a negative to the player, he meant nothing to Minnesota. They were losing him. So he gets thrown in the deal. They get a 4th-round pick, and they get Andre Schuster, who the Ducks are familiar with, and he fills a body that with one going out the door, you have another one coming in. Ultimately, the Ducks got a 4th-round pick for John Klingberg and a warm body and a guy that was out the door in Minnesota. So it's not great, but it is something at the very least. It's a lottery ticket in Nesterenko, another lottery ticket in a 4th-round pick, and Andre Schuster.
Here's the other question around the deadline as far as what didn't happen. Given the returns that we saw for Jeannot, and even if you want to say like Lars Eller and Jordan Greenway and some of these guys who are better than the players that I'm about to name, but I think are of a similar type. How much of a missed opportunity is it, do you think, Carrick, Comtois, Jones, and Grant didn't get moved?
Yeah, I think there's some missed opportunity. I think Greenway, as an example, very similar game to Max Jones, holds more value there. Same with above Carrick and Grant. I don't think you're getting the 3rd-round pick for them. I'm sure teams called and asked about these guys, I'd imagine. There aren't too many guys who are untouchable, and the Ducks are one of the worst teams in the league. So you're calling, you're asking, hey, is this guy available? Is that guy available? What's it going to take?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the Ducks are in no hurry to move those guys. So unless you're overpaying to get those guys, you're not going to get them. And it makes sense for the Ducks to not move them in that sense, right? So is a team going to pay a third-round pick for Max Jones when they can go and use their third-round pick somewhere else and get Jordan Greenway? Probably not, right? So Maxime Comtois might be the only one that you say, could you have gotten something more for him now than you will later? But I don't know how much of a return is built into what you could get for Maxime Comtois right now, the way he's struggled and the way the team has openly punished him for struggling. Like, he's been healthy scratched, and like, it's not been a good run for him. You know, it's a Jesse Puljujarvi situation without the was a former top 5 pick, right? Like, that's, and is playing a good defensive game and has good underlying numbers defensively to back it up, right? Like, it's that with. He's that without that pedigree behind him, so you're not getting a third-round pick for them. And if you're the Ducks at that point, is it maybe better to keep this player and see what you can get from him? He's an RFA. You have control on him rather than getting a 4th-round pick. I would say yes. I'd rather keep Maxime Comtois rather than get a 4th-round pick at this point and see what you have in him.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And, you know, like I said earlier regarding the Klingberg thing, as far as do you trade these guys for less than you want and possibly set yourself up to be seen as someone who will come down, or do you hold out and not move these guys because you want to set the precedent? That could be what it is for all 4 of these guys. You're absolutely right. There's no rush to move on from them, and if nobody is willing to pay more than they might actually be worth in terms of draft assets, yeah, I think that's totally fair. I guess, you know, part of it is like, I just wonder how Maxime Comtois for Jesse Puljujarvi never happened.
Yeah, so do I.
That's the one for me, right? I wonder why isn't Sam Carrick and Sam Lafferty similar players? Right? Like, and again, these are all hypotheticals, and we don't know the way these conversations go. We don't know the way these teams view these individual players, all these kinds of stuff. I just think this is part of this deadline's, you know, like, because look, we all knew we weren't making the playoffs this year. This was our playoffs. This is what this year is for, is to try to get the most out of this team in return in terms of draft capital or assets moving forward to improve the team. They got a couple of guys that are going to be helpful. They got a couple of picks that could be useful. I don't think that this team is in any real way in a better spot going forward than they were coming into this deadline. I don't think they're worse off, but I don't think they're in a better place.
No, they
and
they
I
did
think
what they
that's
should.
the part of this that's frustrating for me.
They did what they should, but they didn't make a splash, right? Like, they moved the guys they had to move. Nothing made them really better. Nothing, you didn't really get significantly worse, again, because Schuster replaces Kulikov. Brock McGinn comes in, makes your forward group a little bit better. You lose Klingberg off the blue line, but what really was he giving you anyway, right? Like, what drop-off is there for the Ducks? How much worse can you get from losing John Klingberg in the way he was playing at this point? So, yeah.
Also, I do want to point out, he did have more goals this season than Tanner Jeannot. I just keep wanting to point that out to people. Tanner Jeannot got 5 fucking picks and a defensive prospect.
Yeah. Listen.
And part of that is the $800,000 he makes.
On the flip side of this, amazing deal for the Wild.
Oh, hell yeah. They came out of it.
They do not have a... Kalen Addison is their power play 1 quarterback. I love him.
And they refuse to use him,
but
by the way.
They refuse to use him. They don't trust him as much. He's been healthy scratched a few times this year. Their drop-off after that is Dumba, who really isn't a power play quarterback. They get exactly what they don't have. And like we said, they added skill, Johansson, Nyquist, Sundqvist to their top, to their forward group. Some skill, some more goal-scoring touch to them. And then on the blue line, they get exactly what they need. And for John Klingberg, I mean, talk about switching situations, right? Like, you go the worst offensive team in the league, you jump on a power play with Kirill Kaprizov and Zuccarello and Boldy and Eriksson Ek like that, and you get the power play, you get a quarterback that power play, and you don't have to worry about playing defense because the rest of the guys on that blue line, the other 5 guys, yeah, they can play defense. Like, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. So it's the perfect fit for him. It's the perfect fit for the Wild. I think he'll do great. I think he'll have a great 20 games or whatever to end the year, and he won't get a $7 million contract. That's, I think, out the window for him, but he will recoup some of that value here. It's the best place he could have possibly gone.
Especially the Wild are 9th best in shots allowed and are 2nd best in expected goals allowed per 60. So this is exactly the situation for him to move into. Like you said, they don't trust Kalen Addison, and this is exactly what they don't have on that blue line. This is going to actually be his best shot to maybe come out of this summer with something closer to 4 or 5 years by maybe $5 or $6 million a year. So, if you're John Klingberg, as fucking much of a drag as this season was at some point, I don't know that you could have thought it worked out too much better, I guess, unless, you had like an Erik Karlsson type, oh my God, he's so great on this shitty team kind of thing. But yeah, like, I think if you're John Klingberg, you're happy. I think if you're Bill Guerin, you're ecstatic. And if you're Pat Verbeek, you got something. What you got. Yeah. It is what it is. I just don't think it's unfair to say that the returns are underwhelming, and I think that the deadline as a whole are underwhelming.
Yeah, I saw a lot of bees going around and rating the deadline, and like you didn't lose, but you didn't win, right? Like, that's the thing.
B is optimistic to me. I am CC minus.
No, that's
this
where
deadline.
I'm at. I think it has to be in C, because I think once you start getting lower than C, you've lost, and I don't think they lost, but they didn't win either. So you're right in that CC minus, where it is what it is, right? Like, you did what you had to do. You didn't really win on the deals. You didn't really lose on the deals. You should have got more, but you weren't in a position to get more. So it's a straight C. And I've seen way too many Bs, and I don't see where it's coming from. Unless, like, again, your only thought process is you brought John Klingberg in to trade him, you got something for him. That's good enough. But I think there was opportunities to get more, and the risk didn't pan out. So yeah, I'm in full C. The deadline as a whole, or just like the weeks leading up to it, it was a great it was a blast. A lot of great trades, a lot of big names traded, like that part of it. Really good fits. Not really any like crazy lopsided trades. Like, they all made sense. It was a good trade period there from like the end of February to the deadline leading up to the beginning week of March. I was happy with a lot of the deals. It was fun going through and talking about a lot of the ones went through, because they just made sense. A lot of them made sense from both sides.
Yeah, I think it was Cap Friendly who said, as far as trades made in the 2 weeks between the 2 weeks heading into the deadline, including the deadline, that this was the most, with like 72 trades or something like that made, and like the average is roughly 60. And I think you can look at some of the trades that were made and say let me say it this way. It felt to me that more of these trades were NHL trades than AHL swaps. Yeah. So it's interesting. I want to do 2 questions real quick, and then we'll get the hell out of here. The first question is the 2 big names that didn't get moved for Anaheim at this deadline, with the understanding they didn't have to get moved, and it was always unlikely that they would be moved, and especially now with what we know about Henrique's injury.
Yeah.
Do you think Gibby and Henrique are on this team when training camp starts?
John Gibson, no. Better chance for Adam Henrique. I think it depends how some of these moves and how free agency works for some teams. Henrique does not feel like a draft day trade for me. He feels like a week or 2 into free agency trade. Did we miss our guy? We need something.
Right. Okay.
John Gibson,
I can see that.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Lucas Dostal has an excellent opportunity here to take over. Stolarz is done for the rest of the year. They're going to split starts, Dostal and Gibson. Dostal's already shown in this short period of time that he is ready for the NHL level. I think John Gibson has shown that he can still be a quality NHL goaltender. He's increased his value a little bit. I think at the draft, when teams are starting to evaluate their goaltending situation, how they did in playoffs, how they thought their guy was going to do if that didn't pan out, teams like Toronto, teams like Pittsburgh, teams like Seattle, other teams that don't have maybe a guaranteed number one netminder, if things don't pan out for them, those teams are going to start calling Anaheim for John Gibson. And he's got a good 10, 11, 12 games for the rest of the year when you think Dossel's going to get the other half of those starts to continue to show that he is a legitimate, NHL starter,
absolutely.
that there will be a lot of teams calling. So I don't think John Gibson's part of this team come next year. I think Adam Henrique, for me, it's 50-50. It just depends if teams feel they can use him or not.
For sure. And then the other thing I want to do, because I love to do this, is steal shit from other podcasts. There's a podcast called Split Zone Duo, and they've been doing they do college football, and they've been doing conference wrap-ups this last couple, I'd say, last month and a half maybe. Right. And one of the things that the guy Alex Kirshner did is something called Rose, Bud, Thorn. Rose is somebody who's in a great spot, a winner. A Bud is something who is in an intriguing and exciting position moving forward, and you're kind of excited to see what they become. And then a Thorn is a dud. There is a podcast my girlfriend used to listen to where they did Roses and Thorns, and I can't think of the name of it, but it always made me chuckle because it's just such a perfect way to split it. So I will ask you, league-wide, not just the Ducks real quick, coming out of this trade deadline, who is your Rose?
Okay, you're gonna have to stick with. I am very slow. Rose again was
great. Like it came out well. They're in a really good spot. They did what they needed to do. They're in a good spot. Bud this is an exciting thing moving forward, and it's something worth watching. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out, but it's interesting and exciting moving forward. And then Thorn is a disaster or just bad.
Yeah, I have a tough time. Like my row is that one team just keeps jumping in just because of the level of acquisition and what this means for the team. There's a lot of teams that did really well. But I might, you know what? I'm going to say my Bud first. I think New Jersey with Timo Meier. I wanted to put them for my Rose, but I think it means a lot for them now. But going forward, like that acquisition is huge, right? Like it's so important for them, not just this year, but for the next 5, 6, 7 years when they get this guy extended and signed. I was going to put them for the Rose because it's just huge and it's exciting and it's great. But I think I'm debating between a couple here. Ottawa and Chychrun, great move. I like what the Wild did. I like what the Rangers did. But ultimately, Toronto is up there. I got to go with Boston, man. I really like, for me, they're the Rose. Bertuzzi and Orlov and Hathaway are perfect additions to a team that didn't really need to do anything, but they all made sense. And they all, they're not even holes, but they all just added to the team. Right, they added depth in key places to a team that is, has a very good chance of winning it all this year, and they need to. Right, so I would give them my Rose, and then my Thorn is the one that just didn't pan out. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That one's tougher because there's a lot of teams.
So here, I'll give you a second to sit on that. I will give my Rose is Toronto. I'm 100% with you. I think everything that they did makes sense. I think the situation that they are in post-deadline heading into the playoffs and the offseason, they are in a really good spot. I'm very excited to see what they can do. My Bud, I really want it to be Detroit, but I'm going to pivot, and I am going to say it's Nashville. Because I don't know that any team made as aggressive and concerted effort to pull out of a skid in the way that they did. Not only did they announce that they're switching from Poile to Trotz and they're going to have a new direction entirely as a franchise from the top, but they moved on from a guy who was a Calder nominee last year, right? I think Jeannot ended up fifth-ish, right in around that range. They moved on from Ekholm. Like they made a lot of moves that are going to allow them to be they moved Michael Granlund to Pittsburgh. They are in a position to really be one of the more interesting teams over the next couple of years as they try to get back to being a more competitive and complete roster. They took a lot of gambles. They swung on Duchesne. They swung on Turris. They swung on Ryan Johansson. They just didn't really work out. They never really, other than that one run to the Stanley Cup Finals, which is more than a lot of teams ever get, to be sure, they weren't able to do it. But I think where they're at right now, there's a lot to be excited about and a lot to be optimistic about. And I got to be honest, I just hate how happy all the fucking Predators fans that I follow on Twitter are right now, because it's awful. I don't like that. I don't like the Predators. I don't want those people to be happy. Well, I do, because I like them.
So I was struggling, and then I found a team that it feels like it's a no-brainer, easy to land on for the Thorn, and it's the Vancouver Canucks.
Ooh.
All things considered in this deadline, not even moves that didn't happen. Bo Horvat getting traded because you spent money on JT Miller. Whatever. I think the return was okay. I don't hate the return, but that move, you make that move, you need to pivot to we're not competing anymore. We're not doing anything. Then JT Miller's name comes up in trade conversations. Almost gets moved to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Yep. Very close to happening. He still could get traded. Demko is in conversations to get traded. Garland's in conversations to get traded. Myers is in conversations. Brock Besser almost goes to the Penguins. Like, all these guys basically except Pettersson and Hughes and Beauvillier, who was just brought in, and Kuzmenko, who's just re-signed. We're all in conversations to go out the door. Kravtsov trade, whatever, I actually like it. It's not that bad. But then you go out and you add Hronek for a first and a second. Why? Like, it makes no sense to me why they did this, and that's the thing that adds to me is Horvat is one thing, whatever, you had to move him, but then the guy that you signed that made you move Horvat, you almost trade every goddamn name on that roster, and then but you don't move them, but then you add to the roster. Like, that for me is just brainless behavior. I know everybody's kind of in that boat, but like, you look at this team and you just wonder what is going on. The contracts on this team, the guys they have signed at a certain amount of money, like, I feel for Pettersson. I really like him. I feel for Quinn Hughes, but it's a long, long road ahead for the Canucks, and there's just no clear sense of direction. They go one way and then they go the other way with their next move every time.
Yeah, for me, it's the Flames.
Yeah.
They didn't get better. They didn't get worse. They traded Ritchie Brothers. That's all. And added Stetcher, and that's it. And I just, that is so. I think they traded for Dryden Hunt from Toronto, but even that, like,
nothing big.
Calgary didn't do anything. Like, you just signed Weegar and Huberdeau the extensions. I still don't mind those extensions. You signed I still don't mind the offseason that they had. I don't think that the moment they lost Kachuk and Gaudreau, they automatically had to pivot into rebuilding. I don't think that was true. But after the way that this year went, you didn't do anything to make yourself better, either this year or next year. Like, that's the part of it for me is if you're Calgary, if you're a Calgary fan right now, short of the fact that we just got to retire Jarome Iginla's number, I don't know what there is to be optimistic about, man. I mean, maybe if you want to say the reason they didn't do too much is because it feels like the Treliving and Sutter era might be over and those dudes might both be gone before the draft. Okay, fine. I don't think that's necessarily unfair. But Treliving didn't do anything to make the team better. He didn't do anything to make the team worse. And they're not a very good team right now. They haven't gotten shit out of Huberdeau. Weegar's been fine. Kadri's been fine. They're playing Milan Lucic like top 6 minutes every fourth game or something stupid. It was this to me. Calgary, and I think you're right with Vancouver, came out of this deadline in the worst shape because nothing actually adds up. I'm a little bit more forgiving with the Vancouver stuff because Hronek's age and what he brings, and like you said, the opportunity for him to be a legitimate pairing for Quinn Hughes because he has that physicality, he has some offensive upside to him. You know what I mean? But and in a sense, it makes sense with them not having traded JT Miller because, as Patrick Alvin said, I'm not trading for picks. I want players. But fucking hey, dude, trade him. Get that $8 million the fuck out of here. Take those picks and then get busy. There was still time. You could have added players. You could have gone out and tried to make things happen. You don't trading. But again, the moment they hired Rick Tocchet to deal with JT Miller, that was the game. So, I was pretty bullish on, some of the Vancouver stuff because I didn't think it was quite as bad as they said. But I think, the longer I've sat with it and the totality of it, they didn't get themselves in a better position. I don't mind the Kravtsov thing. I like that they added Ethan Bear earlier in the year. I like Hronek. Again, we talked about it. Why can't I think of his name all of a sudden? The Horvat trade was fine. I think whatever they end up getting for Besser is going to be fine. But, man, they had one shot to move JT Miller. And I don't know that they're going to get a second one. It's kind of how I feel with San Jose and Carlson. Now, I don't think I don't think San Jose is completely out of an opportunity. I think they could retain some salary on him and send him to Ottawa. I really do. I like that a lot.
That'd be great to see him back there.
It's interesting, right? Because I heard some people talking about I don't remember who it is. I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about how with the team being up for sale and trying to figure out the state of the team for new owners, they might not want to add long-term salaries, especially significant long-term salaries, which clearly Erik Karlsson is. But I think you can very easily make the argument that Erik Karlsson is the one exception in this sense because he's coming back to a team where he made his name. He's coming back to a team that he didn't actually want to leave. He just didn't fucking like Melnyk. And the moment he walks back through that door, you're going to sell 100,000 jerseys. I don't think the very legitimate financial risks and repercussions of adding a long-term contract are all there for Erik Karlsson specifically. So I think, in that sense, San Jose is in a better spot than they are with JT Miller in Vancouver, who at this point looks like he's just a Canuck.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah, it's looking rough. I don't think that one is a summer one. They'd be very lucky to get him out the door in the summer if somebody like Pittsburgh picked up the phone again. I'm about to have literally a full-on concert in the next room, and I feel like our audio might get copyrighted if anything gets picked up. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate. I know it's been a couple weeks. Steven and I have tried to jump on a few shows, and I've pushed it off every time we've tried to jump on for different reasons. But we're happy to purposely pushed it back this week to make sure we could get a review of the trade deadline. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with kind of just a regular show recapping how the next week of Ducks games went, and then finish off the rest of the season strong, and hopefully go live for the draft lottery and get us Connor Bedard. That's the goal. Trade deadline's over, so the only thing to look forward to now is the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. But the Ducks keep winning games, so I don't know if that's going to happen now. But anyway.
I'm a huge proponent of the gold method now.
Yeah?
Just because we're winning games. I think the gold method is stupid. I hate the draft.
Yeah.
But if we're going to keep winning games, I might as well just try to make it work for us,
Well, there we go. But we'll see. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.